Perfect. Oh, okay. I think we may just be in animations. Yep. Yep. Perfect. And then can we get that, get it off the screen? Perfect. All right. And here's the agenda for today that we're seeing, and I will go ahead and turn everything over to Director Kipps.
Great. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. So great to see everyone here today in my backyard, Summit County. So I just live in Breckenridge. This is one of my closer commutes, and really appreciate everyone being here. And hopefully this is fairly easy for folks. You know, Summit County is situated right in the middle of the state for the most part. And yeah, so it's been a busy few weeks, and want to give a special shout out to Heather, Nathan, and Emma for helping to facilitate a really wonderful tour that we had down in the Rio Grande Basin. I was going to say, like, was that a month ago or whatever? It was a week ago, and it was just absolutely great to be in your backyard and visit, and the DNR and CWCB and all of our Division of Water Resources. We're going to be doing more of these tours too. So we'll hopefully be in your basin soon as we kind of figure out how to do more tours like that. Yeah, I just want to welcome you all here to Summit County, give you all a little snapshot of the area. Summit County is, historically, this was Ute lands, and the Ute used to summer in this area, very similar to other parts of the state. And then the next, I would say, major kind of event in this area was during the gold rush era. And we had a considerable amount of gold, silver mining, you know, throughout Summit County, and in particular in Breckenridge. And in fact, back in 1887, it's where Tom's Baby was originally found and mined. And if you don't know Tom's Baby, the old miner named Tom Groves mined a 13-pound, 7-ounce gold nugget, and it is still the largest gold nugget ever found still today. And believe it or not, it was found right down the street from my house in this area called Faneuil Hill. So I live, when you're on kind of Main Street, Breckenridge, there's a road called French Gulch Road, and you just head down there till you hit a green gate, and then it's a short hike to this particular area where Tom's Baby was found. So you can imagine 1887 mining a huge gold nugget like that. Well, Tom wrapped the nugget into, you know, a little blanket that he had, and ended up, you know, hiking into town, because back then, of course, he could have been shot with that. And but that's pretty amazing for our local, you know, history for mining. You know, moving forward, I would say the next big event was really kind of the ski resorts, and we're situated right here. This is the base of what's called Peak 9, and Breckenridge Ski Resort has the ski resort area is considered like Peak 6, Peak 7, Peak 8, Peak 9, and there's Peak 10 as well. This is where on the weekends my kids are in little ski school programs, so I pull up right here and walk over there and meet them right on the hill. But this is it was founded in 1961, and so quite a few years ago. And it was actually the first part of the ski resort was not this area. It was considered Peak 8. So when you drive into town and you look up at the ski resort and you see kind of the larger mountain right there, that's Peak 8. So the first ski resort in 1961 was kind of skied in that area. I've been in this in Summit County for about 20 years, so I'm almost a longtime local, not quite yet, according to my friends that have been here like 45 years and longer. But it's a wonderful place to live. You know, we're a community that really kind of depends on tourism. So, you know, the Main Street area, it's always, you know, very pleasant. We have a lot of nice restaurants. And the outdoors, you know, the environment is really kind of our economic driver here. So whether you're here for hiking or mountain biking or skiing or fly fishing or hunting, all the different kind of outdoor values are really important to our community. I've been involved a lot on, as you know, as many of you know, forest health and kind of watershed health issues. We're also a community that despite how green it is right now, we historically have about 35 wildfires a year in Summit County, and most of those don't really make the news, but some of them do. But when we get a break and stuff, or depending on what direction you head out from Summit County, whether you're heading north or south, because that's the only way out, north or south. But take a look at some of the higher elevation mountain slopes, and you'll really see some of the proactive forest health treatments that have occurred in this area. And if you take a really close look, you'll see where there's been like some major fire breaks that have occurred in very strategic areas, close to where homes are at. And we have about 156,000 acres of dead trees. And so most of the lodgepole pine trees in Summit County are dead, which create definitely a forest health challenge. So that's enough about, I think, Summit County and Breckenridge area, but it's a real honor to have you all here today. I really feel like, meeting in person, first of all, that's my preference. And hopefully you all are okay with that. I know that COVID is unfortunately the gift that keeps on giving in so many ways. A lot of people have had COVID once or twice. I was telling Andy, I was at a fundraising event just in town a few weeks ago, and it was like half the crowd, got COVID. I never got it. But I know depending on how people feel and so forth, they prefer to meet virtually. So that's why I think it's nice to have this virtual option for folks as well, depending on what their schedule looks like and so forth. But my preference is to meet in person, if at all possible. So just moving forward to kind of highlighting, some highlights from our last meeting. Believe it or not, our last meeting was in February. I know some of you were here, some of you were virtual, but as you all recall, we brainstormed how we can chart a path forward for the IBCC, and we discussed some themes. We discussed what are the intrabasin issues and topics where the IBCC can be a meaningful difference. We discussed, out of that discussion, a subcommittee was formed to scope an IBCC work plan. So I really want to give a shout out and thank Aaron and Lisa for stepping up. There's Aaron, I'm like, where's Aaron? For really stepping up to be leaders of that subcommittee and to identify and advance, drought resilience through project implementation. That was one major item discussed among other topics that we'll discuss later on today. But the bottom line, I feel like, from our last meeting was, it's really, now's the time to take action, right? I think everyone really agreed to that. And so the water plan draft, as you all know, is released today. So if you all want to take a look at what it looks like, I brought a copy that Russ gave me how long ago? I don't know, a few weeks ago. But with the abundance of state and federal funds, Nate Pearson will talk a little bit about that later on today. The moment is now, and we want to hear from everyone, but now's the time to advance projects, in your basin implementation plans and in the water plan. And you all, as IBCC leaders in your basin, you play a really integral role. I mean, you're all elected to be here. And I really appreciate you all, stepping up to want to be the leaders in your basins. But to think about it, the people in your basin have faith in you that you're going to represent their interests. You're going to raise hell when you need to raise hell. You're going to be collaborative, hopefully most of the time, and we've all worked together. But you're going to be a force for your area. When you come here, we're all one Colorado, right? We're not all the different basins, but we're talking about what we need to do for Colorado. And this is the sweet spot for the Interbasin Compact Committee. So, as we work to advance the water plan grants, I want to get a sense from you all, how many of you have helped to advance a water plan grant in your area? How many of you? And, the deadline's July 1st. So let me see your hands again. Okay, yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it. For folks that, and online, raise your hands too, for folks that have worked. Yeah, you see some of that. Good, thank you. Many of you have. And I want all of you to be involved with that process because we're going to see some federal and state funds. We all want to work together And again, you're all leaders in your area. So thank you so much. I really look forward to today's discussion. We have an awesome agenda, to say the least. Later on today, we're also going to have a celebratory lunch as we kick off the water plan process, as we look for input from around the state. And Becky and Russ and everyone at CABC, but I really can't thank you all enough for all of your work to help to set up this meeting, but also, and Viola, of course. Where's Viola? She's amazing at setting up everything. But we're going to have a great celebration as we discuss, the water plan rollout. So with that, I think that's it for me. I'm happy to answer any questions right now, or we can move it to you all for Basin Updates. And we really wanted to schedule a little bit more time for Basin Updates than historically, because want to hear, we want to make sure we give enough time to hear what's going on in your neck of the woods. Sound good? Okay, good. Okay, let's move to Basin Updates. And Russ, you want to facilitate that?
Sure, and I'm thinking maybe based on your good thoughts that what we'll do is if you don't mind kicking us off, Terry, good to see you, by the way. What we'll do is just go to, I think that what we did last time was had each basin report out, and then if you're not the one presenting, maybe instead of just skipping over you, could at least say your name and introduce, and see Sean's already delegating like a master. All right, so we'll start with Terry. Go ahead.
There, I think you can hear me now. So I'm from the Arkansas Basin, and also we worked on the BIP, of course. We've been working on that for a long time. And a lot of good projects coming forward. A lot of projects are in the area of either watershed health, stream management, also a lot of storage projects that a lot of folks are looking at. And there are a lot of folks in the basin utilizing water plan as well as water supply reserve account. And typically those people who apply for water plan grants ask for support from our basin, and we've been willing to give that for projects, and vet those and as to applicability, and pretty much give support for vast majority of them. That's about all we have right now. We're meeting in Pueblo, both virtually and in person. I think it's been a challenge to try to get folks to go back to meeting physically. I think that's really important. And I think it's important to all of our members of the roundtable that we get back to meeting in a face-to-face forum, understanding that there is a value to being able to remote in when necessary. Of course, I think the real challenge is determining when's it necessary to do that. But anyway, those are some of my thoughts from our basin.
Oh, thank you, Viola. Appreciate that. All right, Jairus, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Russ. Appreciate Terry being there. Sorry I couldn't join you. I've had some fairly serious back surgery, and the doctor won't let me drive much. So, unfortunately, I have to be there in the witness protection program. Our roundtable really has, in the last 6 months, focused heavily on public education and Pepo, and on the Arkansas River Watershed Collaborative. We're really getting heavily involved in forest health and restoration projects. And of course, we're looking at the BIP, but I think those two things have really taken up a lot of our time. Pepo, which I feel is a way for IBCC to really be a force statewide, and I hope we explore that today. So thank you.
Thank you, Jairus. Thanks, Terry. And we'll move on to Stan.
Thank you. First of all, I join with Director Gibbs and welcome you to Summit County. My daytime job now is just one of the members of the board of directors of Middle Park Water Conservancy District, which includes the entirety of Grand and Summit counties. And he's got a lot of stories, but I think my original board,
Thank you, Stan. I didn't know if anyone had to add to that, Paul, or anyone. Okay. Oh, maybe. Okay.
I was just going to say what a great job Stan did summarizing where the roundtable's at. And hello, everybody.
Good to see you. Thanks so much. All right.
Just to note that this is Paul's first vacation in 14 years or something like that. So appreciate that he's calling in.
Doesn't look like
He clearly doesn't know how to take vacation.
Yeah. All right. Sean, do you want to introduce yourself and summarily pass the buck as well if you need to?
Sean Cronin, South Platte Basin Roundtable, and I'd like to introduce Jim Yon with the South Platte Basin Roundtable.
Thanks, Sean. That was a nice introduction. Well, it's good to be here. So thanks for having us, Dan. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the temperature. It was 101 yesterday at home and the wind was blowing again. So it's nice to be up here in the coolness of the mountains. So I'm enjoying it. As far as the South Platte Basin Roundtable, we've been, of course, like everybody else, we worked on our basin implementation plans along with the Metro Roundtable, and we have a good set of people that work on all of that, and I think we came up with a really good basin implementation plan, and it's always good. We have a really good relationship with the Metro Roundtable, and we should, because we're on the same river. So we did that, and then we've had a few requests for grants and a few requests for letters of recommendation, and we don't approve them all. So, you know, we really scrutinize them, I think, pretty closely, and I think that's kind of what we've always done on the South Platte Basin Roundtable, because there could be a lot of projects that come from our area. There's a lot of people there, so we feel it's our obligation to scrutinize those pretty closely and only pick ones that we think are really worthy of grant funds or approval. So when you come to us, it's not always easy. And some people are squeamish to even come to us, but if you have a good one, we'll approve it. So that's always good. And you know, we have a well, he's been there for a little while, but Sean Chambers from the city of Greeley is a really good new leader for us. He's our chairperson for the South Platte Basin Roundtable, and it's always hard because we started meeting in person, but we're doing it virtually as well, and it's tough. It's better just to be there in person. It's a lot more. Then you can give hugs. Like the first time I saw Sean, I got to give him a hug right away, and it was great. And you know, we've been filling some vacant positions and things like that, and we're trying to stay on task. And I think we're doing a pretty good job on the South Platte Basin Roundtable. And we have a website for the South Platte Basin, and that's southplattebasin.com in conjunction with the Metro Roundtable. And it's a nice website if you ever need any information about the South Platte Basin. We've been keeping it updated, and it's a good one. Secondly, I just want to give an update on our basin as a whole as far as water is concerned. You know, we had about an average snowpack, and it was really a cool spring. Our crops and everything are behind because of that, but it's flipped and it's pretty hot. So it's been like we had a really nice rain early in June. Denver had a nice rain, and there was about 4,000 CFS coming out, and we just, on the lower basin, we ate it all up. We didn't let Nebraska have any of it. So we put some in reservoirs. We were able to top them off, some of the ones that we were using. So that was good. But since that time, we haven't had hardly any rain, and it's been more like a convection oven, and our grass is pretty crispy, and ranchers are wondering if they're gonna have to start feeding cattle here pretty soon. So it's pretty tough. We did have a little sprinkle last night. My wife sent me a video of a 1-minute little sprinkle off of our deck, and she said there really wasn't any rain, but it smelled good. So that was nice. We are, though, below average now in our flows at Kersey. I always look at the Kersey gauge, which is right outside of Greeley. That's where all the major tributaries, Cache La Poudre and St. Vrain, and all of them have come into the South Platte. So we watch that. There's only 238 CFS there today, and there's only 35 CFS going across the state line. But between Kersey and the state line, we're diverting 1,250 CFS. So that tells you once again of the return flows that we deal with on the South Platte. And it doesn't always make sense when you add it up, but we do get a lot of, we live off of return flows during the summertime. So irrigation is going hot and heavy. You know, in the North Sterling, we're releasing 437 CFS right now for irrigation. We are continuing to work on the South Platte Regional Opportunities Water Group, SPROG, as some of you have heard that. So we're continuing to try to discuss regional opportunities, and we're feeling quite a bit of pressure. I don't know if you've been to Denver or the Front Range lately, but it's growing, and so there's a lot of pressure for water there, and we're just trying to maintain. One of the objectives of SPROG is not to dry up our agriculture, just to serve the population. So there is sometimes where water does get out of the state that we are entitled to, and so we're just looking at that and how we can do it on a regional basis. And out of that, and among some other things, the Northeast Colorado Water Co-op and different things, Parker Water and Sanitation District and the Lower South Platte Water Conservancy District, along with a reservoir that I take care of, the Pruitt Reservoir, we've been discussing what we call the Platte Valley Water Partnership. And that's where Parker owns some water way down in the lower part of the river, and they're looking at building a pipeline back. And they've been willing to work with us to not dry up the farm ground that they bought, but tap into some of the free river conditions and use the farms as maybe a backup. And it's a good partnership, and we're getting close to agreements on there. So that's pretty exciting. And that's kind of, we look at it as the initial step of the SPROG idea, a more regional idea. And maybe you've seen it in the paper. It's kind of in contrast to the RWR out of the RIP water out of the Rio plant. Oh no, is that what it, no, it's, yeah, renewable water resources. So it's kind of in contrast to that, where we're trying to work with a municipality as opposed to the Douglas County people coming and taking water out of farms. So I think it's a good alternative to that. And then finally, I just update, there was the Senate Bill 22028, which was the groundwater compliance, and there was some for the Rio Grande, and there was also some for the Republican. The Republican River Basin is actually in the South Platte Basin Roundtable, so I have to touch on them as well. And so that came through the legislature, and I think the governor signed it, and so it'll kick into effect July 1st or somewhere near there. And in the Republican River Basin, they're looking at drying up 25,000 acres of farm ground to meet compact obligations with Kansas and Nebraska. So that's kind of hard on that area. They have to have 10,000 acres by end of 2024, and an additional 15,000 by the end of 2029. So they're looking at trying to set up a mechanism to voluntarily get some land taken, their wells retired. So that's the main goal of that. So that's on the Republican Compact. And then on the Nebraska Compact, we've had some news. I don't know if you've watched, but we've had some news where Nebraska wants to exercise its wintertime ability to take some water. So from October 15th to March 31st, in the compact, it says Nebraska can divert up to 500 CFS for irrigation in Nebraska, but they would take the water in Colorado. So it's a diversion right at the state line. And I appreciate, Dan, you came out and toured with us, and Kevin Ryan, the state engineer, and some attorney, I'm going to forget all the people that were there, but there was a couple of attorney general's people. And so we appreciate that and you looking into that. But, it is their right to do that. But there's a few things, nuances where they think they're going to get more water than they are, I believe, because it's a junior right. It's a December 17th, 2021 right. And Julesburg Reservoir down there is in 1904. So you have to fill Julesburg first. Colorado also gets the first 35,000 acre feet, and then Nebraska can come in. And it really puts them in the January, February timeframe when it's really hard to run water because of ice conditions. So I don't think it's going to generate as much water as they're thinking, but the Nebraska legislature did approve $53.5 million to look at it and maybe even to purchase right away and different things like that. So we're just kind of waiting to see what happens there, but that's kind of the news on the Nebraska front. And they used our BIP against us in that. They said, the governor came out and said, there's 282 new projects going on the South Platte Basin, and so we got to do something. But the other thing you have to keep in mind, it only affects the lower section of the river, so District 64, and that's the last, probably 75 miles of the river. So they can't call anything up above that. And so it doesn't really affect any of our water projects. Everything is pretty much above that. Even Pruitt and North Sterling reservoir diversions are above that line. So I just don't think Nebraska has looked at it that carefully, but if they want to do it, it is their right to exercise that part. But there's also a whole nuance with the 3-state program and the endangered species in Nebraska that they need to look at as well. So with that, that's our update on the South Platte.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And I just want to add, Jim, thanks so much for helping to organize that tour too. That was really important. Yeah. And I know the governor's interested in heading out there sometime soon as well, but the tour is amazing. So
Yeah.
it's great to like be on the ground and see everything.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Jim and Sean, and we'll go to Melly.
Sorry, can you hear me now? I'm a governor appointee. I am a member of the Southwest Basin Roundtable. I'm going to pass it on to Al and Ken because they're the appointed members from the roundtable. But I do want to say one thing because I'm the environmental representative for my roundtable, and I got to say we're just about done with two very major stream management plans that turned into integrated water management plan, one for the San Miguel River, one for the Upper San Juan River, and we have others cooking. So I'm very pleased about that because it's generating a lot of information and projects. So, but I'll let Al and Ken talk about other things within the roundtable.
I don't know if Ken, he wasn't on earlier. I don't know if he's joined. Or there he is. I can recognize that. So Ken, you want to speak from the beyond world?
Go ahead, Al.
Okay. Like the others, you know, the BIP, we completed our BIP. I think we came up with a really good one, and the local expert team led the subcommittee, and we got a good document I guess one of the challenges we came up with is, you know, knowing all the money that's going to be available, or that we hear that's going to be available, trying to get people to put in for grants. So trying to figure out a way to encourage people to put grants together and do whatever to get things done. So, and then, like Melly said, the stream management plans, integrated water management plans are big components. There's another one going on in Mancos that beyond what Melly mentioned, where we just went through we're in the process of revising our bylaws. And as part of that, we are going to hire a new recorder for the roundtable. The Southwest District was providing Laura Span's efforts, which she will be sorely missed, but Steve Wolf wanted her more for himself than than us. So, but she's still willing to share. So we had a meeting, and we're going to have a recommendation for the roundtable meeting later in July to see if we can hire a person there. And I guess a lot been going on in the Pepo world. I think Elaine Chick is spearheading some good efforts to get outreach going and what have you. As far as water conditions, we're like most other people, average to below average, depending on, but fortunately, over on the San Juan, we've had, I know at my house, we've had over 3 inches of rain in the past few weeks, but that hasn't made up for the 2 months of total dryness before that. But, and I know Ken on the other side of the basin's similar. I don't know if they've gotten as much as we have, but so I think that's about it as far as hitting the highlights. We got our upcoming meeting. We have been getting some folks, some grant applications. So we will be spending some money, but just hope to be spending some more in implementing the BIP. So yeah,
I would just throw in that look forward to hearing from Nate and Lauren later. It looks like the current funding obviously is still coming out of the federal, and how the state's working to match some of the federal funding. Somewhere, Dan, and maybe this IBCC or another one, we probably ought to revisit longer term the severance tax funds. Given the constraints, I think it was wise how CWCB went ahead and dedicated 3 years of funding to the roundtables. As Al said, we've changed some of our limits on what you can apply for at the local level. Clearly, the state WSRF funds are gone. But the water plant grant funds are there. So I think there'll be some adjustment from some of the larger grant requests that use the old pathway to get to the state WSRF. But having that 3-year dependability, I think, was important for the roundtables and give us more than a reactive way to utilize that money over 3 years. Beyond that, we have had an unusually early start to the monsoons, about a month early. Given what's happening to our neighbors down in New Mexico, Southern Colorado is a shade better than the drought down in Arizona and New Mexico over the winter. But these monsoons are welcome throughout the Southwest, and things are hopefully getting under control fire-wise. And we look forward to removing fire restrictions. And one of the benefits down here, at least the monsoons beyond water supply, is just keeping those forest fires from starting down here and protecting the tourism and everything else in our forests. I think I'll leave it there. We do have active forest programs, so I don't think the roundtable is maybe as active in forest health as some other roundtables, but we have active programs throughout the Southwest, so they're not being neglected. Thanks.
Al, I just had a follow-up question. You were talking about, urging partners in the roundtable to really take a hard look at, grants that are available and so forth. You mentioned some entities are applying. For anyone not, like, why is the reason? Is it like staff capacity? Is it, and we're going to hear from Nate and Lauren Riss about state and federal opportunities and stuff too, so they'll be able to give us an update, but just kind of curious, is everyone trying to explore what they can explore right now, you feel like?
Right,
or is
and
it-
it's a matter of having the staff or whomever to write the grants, put them together, and the timing of that. We talked about, in the past, there have been folks within the basin that have been willing to assist in that, but that offer really wasn't taken up that much. So, and I know the Colorado River District had a webinar yesterday, and I listened to that, and I was going to suggest to the Southwest that, maybe we put on something like that. And we talked about maybe having some sort of webinar, like before our roundtable meetings, we have a separate meeting or pre-meeting type of thing on whatever the topic du jour might be. And so maybe something like that. But I guess it's a need, and it's somewhat a matter of, we keep on saying the money's available, but how to get it is a challenge. And we've been able to get some, but, utilizing the people's skills that are there.
And just a thought here. I just think that, and I see this happen in the federal government. It's happening to us, is that there's a lot of money coming in, but not enough people to spearhead that effort. Let me give you an example. In the Southwest, in the upper San Juan, part of our stream management plan, integrated management plan, includes a very extensive survey of needs for improving the efficiency and the function of agricultural irrigation infrastructure. And, we put together a really, really good survey. I'm thinking we want to apply for an RCPP. We're working with the local NRCS. We're looking with the local water conservation, soil conservation district, but nobody seems to have a whole lot of time to really take that on. It's not just applying for the grants, but getting, partners engaged and all that. Now, the San Juan Basin group that is working on this applied for a grant with the federal government, with the Bureau of Reclamation, for a coordinator, because that's what we need. We need to coordinate, somebody that actually takes the time to do all, connect all the dots. And we've been waiting for 7 months now, about 6 months or so, to hear back from them. I think the Bureau is just so backed up with all the money coming in, not enough people to work on it. But I think that that's the capacity. I don't know if others have a similar experience, but one thing is having training and having, people that can come and advise you. It's very different from somebody taking the reins and actually make it happen. And I know that I do that for the projects I'm involved in, and it's incredibly time consuming. For this Upper San Juan stuff, I just don't have enough time to put into it. And we need to pay somebody to actually work on that. So for whatever that's worth, and I don't know if others have similar experiences, but you just need somebody that can, for 6 months, full-time or part-time, taken on to put together the funding, get the partners organized, and do all those things.
And that's what I was, excuse me, Terry, as far as staff capacity, that's what Melly detailed more there, was what I was referring to as far as a dedicated person to do the partnering, coordinating, facilitating, as well as maybe grant writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had this,
Yeah, I would like to throw something in a minute. Go ahead.
we had the same problem in the Arkansas some years ago. So what we did, we formed a nonprofit with it's called the Arkansas River Watershed Collaborative. And so we have a full-time dedicated staff, basically, and they actually utilize the South Platte Collaborative for their backup staff, for for all the financing, the calculations, all the accounting and everything. And then we have the coordinator, the Watershed Collaborative coordinator, who actually coordinates these kind of projects. And this, you're going to find, is going to be very common for watershed health type projects, to find the proponent, and who would that proponent be? And that ends up being the Watershed Collaborative becomes a proponent. And it is hugely, you're correct, Millie, it's time consuming. And what we're doing is to help finance it, we're actually asking for donations from all the different water conservancy districts, counties, and so forth to help fund the basic funding of it. So you might want to look at that and maybe get together with Arkansas Basin Roundtable and see how we did that. I think it would be beneficial.
Russ? Yeah, I might speak up on that subject a little too. We're working on a little bit different angle. There's a group called Farmers Conservation Alliance. It's based in Hood, Oregon, that has been working with agricultural entities in Oregon for quite a few years, helping them to write grants to facilitate projects, both with federal money and with private funds like Walton Foundation and Gates Foundation and whatnot. They are interested in working with farmers in Colorado doing the same type of thing. We've met with them several times, both through Colorado Farm Bureau, Colorado Cattlemen's Association. We voted at the last meeting of the Colorado Agricultural Water Alliance to form a partnership where CAWA will be contracting with them to help with some of these projects on an experimental basis. It's just like a 2-year contract to work with them to hopefully see if we can bridge some of those gaps and help with those grant writing and facilitation projects. So we'll see if that works out. I don't know if that's the answer, but it's something that we're going to try with through CAWA.
Thanks so much, Carlisle. And some of that's with that PL 566 funding. Is that what you're leveraging? Okay. Go ahead, Aaron.
And just to add to this, if I remember correctly, there was some state funding that could be used by, I'm looking at Nate, local groups. I'm sure it's in your presentation, but I think there's some state funding that can also be used for like temporary capacity to kind of help get these projects going. So just another option. I don't think it's out on the ground yet, but something to be aware of, and hopefully that can support things as well.
Thanks, Aaron. And Deputy Director Riss will speak to that in a little bit. Go ahead.
I was just curious about the new regional coordinators. And I know that the job descriptions are probably being worked on, but it just sort of occurred to me that that could be at least part of what we're looking at in terms of assistance and maybe just to even set us on the right path.
Yeah, and again, in the presentation, so after Nate goes, we'll have Lauren talk to both those things. But I was thinking the same thing the whole time, kind of jumping at the bit. It's perfect timing to have those discussions, and also maybe to Terry's point, something to think up for future IBCC meetings. We could also have like a presentation from our wake here if that was desirable or something like that.
Thank you.
So hold on to that thought, Lisa. Good thought. All right, next up, Greg Johnson.
Great, thanks, Russ. Morning, all. Greg Johnson, Denver Water, and I am today serving as an alternate for Rick Marsachek, who is our official Metro Basin Roundtable IBCC rep, along with Lisa Darling. So I'll turn it over to Lisa very quickly in a minute here, who is also our vice chair. And between her and Barbara Biggs, who's our chair, who's here today, doing a fabulous job with all things with the roundtable, all the heavy lifting with the Basin Plan. On that note, I also will not steal Bob Peters' thunder. Bob Peters with Denver Water with me, but he'll be on the panel later this morning talking about the great work that he's been leading with the roundtable with some other folks to be as targeted as possible with our funding moving forward and a lot of the projects, priority projects, bigger things that have come out of the BIP and how we can really be more strategic with those and pushing those forward. So like all the roundtables, we've been kind of navigating, getting back to a in-person environment and still working with the hybrid technology. And I think it's been going fairly well, thanks to Lisa and Barb and others. And we've been hosting those most recently back at Denver Water at our new building there. So that I think the technology's been working out, and we are not typically traveling quite as far as a lot of you all to get to roundtable meetings, but as Jim Yon noted when we were chatting this morning, can take almost as long or longer to get from one end of the metro area to the other sometimes. So yeah, traffic is back to pre-COVID norms, unfortunately. So, but yeah, things are going really well. Turn it back over to Lisa.
And I'll just go ahead and turn it over to Jim Yon. So Jim has already covered a lot of the things that we're doing together with the Metro and South Platte Basin Roundtables. We have had some new folks joining our roundtable. We have Randall Navarro, who's our new rec rep, Cynthia Lane and Sarah Klon, who are our new at-large reps. And the reason I bring that up is because it's the people on the roundtable level that we really have to appreciate and lift and empower to have some of the conversations that we're having. I appreciated Al bringing up Pepo. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Barb Biggs did accept a lifetime appointment as the Metro chair, so I just want to get that on record. But I think that Jim covered a lot of the things that we've been working on in the BIP, and I'm really excited to hear your feedback on the presentation that Bob will be giving, because we've really been working hard on coming up with a process. I think we're all looking at a poverty of riches. You know, we're all so poor, all we have is money. We need so much more to actually get those funds out the door. So that's what we're starting to work on and hoping to generate more interest in our grants.
Thank you so much, Lisa and Greg. All right, Bo Schaefer, good to see you.
Well, I'm Bo Schaefer. I'm one of the governor's appointees and don't have any specific realm of influence. But what I try to do is work at the grassroots. I work with Water Education Colorado, a couple of other local education groups, my grandkids' school, go give lectures, things like that, to talk to these people and just to get to the grassroots education of water and what it's good for. And I also approach it from a kind of a kid's point of view, how unique water is and the fun things you can do with it, and just get them interested in water and then let them take it from there. And hopefully we'll produce some people that'll be on these boards someday and we'll have good education and be able to accomplish things.
Thank you so much, Bo. Andy.
Yeah, well, I'm just real briefly, the discussion earlier on trying to build capacity and navigate the BIL. Looking forward to the state's presentation on that. I think the state did set aside, if I understand correctly, $5 million to help folks accelerate their ability to apply for those grants and their capacity to get the federal funds in. The River District has taken that on within our district, and I want to just say to roundtables that are within the district. Our staff did put on, I think Al mentioned it, a pretty good presentation on our internal river district cross-disciplinary team that is gone at the BIL and tried to understand it and its applicability to our water users. And then we've launched within our own community funding partnership program, an accelerator grant program where we will fund up to 85% of the pre-application work, with the deliverable being an application to a federal agency for BIL funding. We're very excited about that. We're trying to provide funding, but also some technical guidance and point folks in the right direction, make connections with the right federal programs. I think it's, this funding's out there for 5 years. 5 years is going to go by in a blink of an eye. And if we don't, at this level, at the state's level, and some of our conservation district levels, really help push this with our water users, it will be gone. And I will just say, if you look at the grants that are being already issued under the BIL funding, as has been the case with a lot of federal funding in the past couple decades, it is by and large going to California and Utah in the Colorado River Basin. And the reason for that is that they have the capacity. They have been waiting for this opportunity, and they have done all this technical work that our water users haven't, because they tend to be bigger water user organizations and just have managed to do that. So I think our state is a little bit behind the 8 ball. No offense to anybody in the state. That's not a criticism. It's just, as water users, we're behind. So we don't mean to crowd the space with our program. We're not competing with the state. We view it as complementary. Carlisle mentioned the Farmers Conservation Alliance. We are also working with them and trying to help bring them into the state, because they are additional capacity that doesn't depend on state dollars. So how do we help do that? And I think there are lots of opportunities here for our water users to really attack the conservation and adaptability issues that we all face. And so we're trying to do that. And I just want to stress for the folks that are within the River District territory, we can't fund projects outside of the River District. Sorry, Jim. But we are, within all of our basins, happy to work with folks, and I'm really excited about it. There's lots of information on our webpage about it. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Andy. All right, Aaron.
Morning, everybody. I don't have a particular geography, and I'm not going to belabor this. I've already mentioned a little bit about, I think everybody's talking about the need for more capacity to get projects going. We're working on a CWCB grant with CAWA and some other partners to, again, kind of provide some additional support to get some of these innovative, really drought resiliency projects scoped and eventually on the ground. So that seems like a common theme. The other thing I just want to mention, I think right now, or maybe later today, my boss, Carlos Fernandez, is leading a panel at the Aspen Institute talking about the need for kind of forest health investments and the importance of the resilience of our state against drought and a changing climate. He was supposed to be interviewing the governor to talk about it, but the governor decided that he was going to go to the Avs celebration parade, which I kind of understand. But I'm glad that that's also part of this discussion. I know that we as an IBCC have been talking more and more about forest health, the resilience of our natural infrastructure, and then the resilience of our physical infrastructure that's tied into that wildland-urban interface. So looking forward to that being part of our ongoing conversations, and curious to hear how that Aspen Institute conversation goes, even without Governor Polis's presence. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks. All right, Nathan.
I think Keith Holland might be on too, if he wants to add at the end. In the Rio Grande, we've been doing quite a bit of collaborative projects. We've actually had 3 letters of support that we addressed this last month for water plan grants. So I think we're doing pretty good of moving our projects forward and getting some of that money out. Our Pepo efforts have been interesting. We kind of went to a council type approach rather than just appointing one person to get overwhelmed and become like Barbara and be indentured for the rest of her life. And so we're trying to, and it's evolving, but it's really working really well to get a little more perspective into our Pepo. We're like Jim, we had near normal snow until the dust on snow events happened when the winds came. The albedo on our snow went from an 88 to a 44 in just a matter of a few days from all the dust. So if you're not familiar, a 44 is similar to a dirt road. And so the reflectivity and absorption rate in 10 days, we lost 14 inches of water. So we went to basically nothing. And then our runoff came out. The Caneos and the Rio Grande both peaked a month early on the run out before crops were really growing. So we've got early runoff, we had early rains. So a lot of farmers will probably be making late payments. So it's a challenge of just our basin right now. We have had a few fire scares in the forest with the drying. So this rain is really welcome. We've had a couple inches of rain that's really helped moderate some of those conditions. We continue to work with our sub-districts on our groundwater issues. Senate Bill 28, getting the funding for the Republican and the Rio Grande is really going to be helpful. We're exploring how we're going to get that money to the good projects to make meaningful impacts. You'll hear from Emma later today. She's definitely one of the shining stars in the Rio Grande Basin, and Heather, and of course Keith, if they have anything else. But I just got to let you in on a secret this morning. I heard my wife's prayer, and it was, bless Nathan that he'll have an open mind, but not an open mouth. So I'm done.
Did she really say that?
You know she did.
I prayed for that too.
Amazing.
I think it's universal. Thank you.
All right, and then we went to Al and Carlisle. Did you have anything else to add?
Well, I think the Colorado Basin pretty well covered. I don't need to add a lot to it. I think one thing I might mention is that we're still in moderate drought in the Colorado Basin, but it's much different than the extreme drought we were in a year ago. As far as the agricultural sector, I think most of us will have nearly adequate irrigation water this year as opposed to last year when we were very, very short and couldn't raise crops. So it looks a whole lot better than it did a year ago. We're not going to send any water downstream much to Lake Powell, but we're at least to meet our own needs. It looks a whole lot better than last year. And we've gotten quite a bit of rain, which is keeping things greened up. It's also very spotty, and right where I'm at in the Grand Mesa, the north side where I'm at on Grand Mesa has been in pretty good shape this summer. Go across the mountain to Cedar Edge, it's been very dry and much different than we've been on the north slope. So it can change a lot in a few miles.
Thanks so much, Carlo, and good to see you. And Pat, anything on your end to add?
As I've been listening, I'm one that likes to kind of tie all the conversations together and look for themes. And I guess some of the themes that I'm seeing emerging around, we're all talking about shortage and how we deal with shortage and what shortage looks like to each of our individual basins or entities that pay our paychecks and such. And I just kind of want to point out, I think there are really some opportunities for success regarding funding if we can get past some of the barriers that Melly talked about. I know I keep over-promising and under-delivering on bringing beer and hard alcohol and seltzers from the direct potable reuse demonstration project that CWCB helped fund. So that's one really good example, I think, where my organization has benefited from partnerships with CWCB and Denver Water and Aurora and others to kind of look at these new technologies for dealing with shortage. And that is in kind of my local neck of the woods is fostering a lot of conversations around now regional reuse and direct potable reuse and indirect potable reuse studies where some of these smaller entities that are dependent on Denver Basin groundwater are looking at ways to use and reuse their return flows. And so it kind of creates these snowballs. And then on the reclamation side, there are those opportunities with grant funding from reclamation. So we actually have a program where we go in and do lighting retrofits in low-income neighborhoods and apartment complexes. And through the reclamation grant, we've actually been able, while we're in there doing the electric lighting retrofits, to go in and say, well, let's replace your toilet, your fixtures, so forth. So kind of looking at ways to really get ahead with what we're kind of calling a Colorado River contingency plan to address shortage. And so those sort of things are exciting. And I know, I believe we're also in conversations with CWCB about doing some leak survey detection. So another one of those services that CWCB is I think kind of helping water providers out with, and is certainly kind of a key function of our plan of getting our distribution system tightened up and finding that water savings wherever we can, given the uncertainty we may face moving forward. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for success if we can all figure out how to build capacity and find ways to use some of the money that's flowing in. So thank you.
Thanks, Pat. And then we have guest visitor, Director Dutton. I figured I'd call on you as well.
Thanks, Russ. I wasn't expecting to be at the table because I'm just here for the party. So, but since I do have a hot mic here, I just want to take a second to thank all of you guys. It's super great to see everybody in person, and so many of you that I haven't got to see in a while. So it's really exciting, and your reports are super informative, and this is just so great to hear everybody even trying to help each other with ideas here, and just sincere thanks to really everybody for the work that you're doing in your communities. And I'm always so excited to come to events like this and just learn from each other. And even though we have a lot of difficult things that we're wrestling with, to hear some of the successes and the ways that people are working together, I think gives me optimism that we are moving things forward in the state. So thanks everybody for your reports.
And thanks, Heather, for being here. We also have a special guest. We have Kate Greenberg, Commissioner of Agriculture. Kate, you want to say a few words? Yeah.
Thanks, Nathan. Hey, everybody and everyone online. It's great being with you. Thanks for gathering here and for the conversation. I'm also mainly here for the party, but also here to listen. And I think this is an important time with the water plan coming out, as well as sort of thinking about what's next from our agency perspectives, and how Department of Ag can continue working with IBCC, CWCB, DNR, all of your roundtables, and advancing our ag goals for the state. So it's good to be with you all.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. It's going to be a great party. Well, Pat, thinking of your comments on themes, a theme I've been hearing too that resonates, I think, with everyone is funding, right? And so let's, since it's on everyone's mind, let's move the agenda around a little bit, and let's bump up federal and state funding update to right now. How about? And we'll move, share your story on the water plan. We'll move that a little bit later on the agenda, but want to welcome Lauren Riss.
Yeah.
Yeah, right in front, yeah. Lauren Riss and Nate Pearson. I think you all know Lauren quite well. Nate Pearson, actually, Nate, you actually spoke at our February meeting, so many of you probably recall Nate, brought Nate in. He used to work for OSPB in the governor's office, and now is our head of recovery, so the recovery director for the DNR. So his job is to really look at, working to implement and look at what state and federal opportunities exist. So I'll turn it over to both of you. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Dan, and pleasure to be here to talk with you all. I think I'm first, right?
Yeah, you go first.
Yeah. Okay. So the last time I spoke with you all at the February meeting, I think I presented just the broad span of what's available in the federal infrastructure bill, which can be pretty overwhelming. As a few of you have talked about, it's available for 5 years. Each federal agency has a different plan of how they're rolling that out, how they're sequencing it over 5 years. Certainly, some of them are spending it evenly over 5 years, some maybe in fits and starts. And so today, hoping to focus a bit more on what can we do to actually zero in as an agency and help support all of you on actually going out and getting discrete awards, as opposed to focusing on however many billion are available to all of the states. And so I've got a few slides. I'm not sure if they're up, but if not, I can talk through them without them as well.
Going somewhere. Oh boy. Oh, because we have to get through. Yeah. Boy, freebies, fun times. Spoiler alerts, everyone.
Yeah, close your eyes.
There you go.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. We got to go backwards now. All right. Here we go. Thanks for the patience. All right. So as I said, last time I discussed, I think, a lot of overwhelming numbers of, what's out there. And so over the last couple months, we've worked to create, on a number of fronts, a greater support mechanism so that we at the department can better support all of the local entities that will actually be doing this work, going after these funds, managing projects. The first thing I want to talk about is this Water Funding Opportunity Navigator, which is linked here, and happy to send that link out to everybody. And I've got a sort of example slide here, but essentially this sorts through all of the many thousands of available federal grants that are open at any given time across all of the different federal agencies, and zeroes in on water-specific funding opportunities. So not what a federal agency has to spend over the next 5 years, but whether they've actually announced right now what is open for application right now. And I'll just move forward. There's a sort of example slide here. And so the content here is not important, but this sort of shows what this looks like. I'm not expecting anyone to read this, but just an example so I can walk through that. You'll click into this, and I've been working to keep this updated at least every month. But essentially, this spreadsheet has a link to the federal website on the far left, sort of the name of the opportunity, a description, the federal agency that's offering it, contact information at that federal agency, when the opportunity opened, when it closes. And then you'll see that color-coded column there, sort of center right, is coded to show you how many days until that opportunity closes. And so the ones that close in just a few days are closest to the top. The ones that you've got more time on are lower down. It also shows you how much is available through the grant, whether there's a matching requirement, and then what types of entities are actually available to receive that funding. And so it's our hope that this can serve as somewhat of a guide for folks to prioritize their effort as they're considering federal funds, also as a guide to work through and sort of strategize on, we've got this project idea, what types of funding streams may this be eligible for? How could we actually go out and get this funding? And I was really, glad to hear everyone here talking about what a capacity gap there is between sort of our ability to go out and get the funds that are available, because I think we've got some great news to share on that front, and Aaron referenced that. Before I talk about the state funds, just want to note that there is a federal sort of technical assistance guide that I think the White House published a few months ago that sort of provides links to all of the available existing federal programs that offer technical assistance. Most of these are pretty passive, self-directed resources, like webinars and websites that teach people how to navigate these processes. So we'll see how sort of valuable that really is, but just wanted to note that. But what I'm really excited to talk about is House Bill 1379, which is exciting on a number of fronts. It provides funding for watershed mitigation or watershed restoration, wildfire mitigation projects, but also as part of this bill, the department advocated for and received $5 million to offer grants to local governments, nonprofits, other entities to offer technical assistance, grant writing support in applying for federal funds. And so we are working on guidance now. We expect, I think, guidance to go before the CWCB during their July meeting. And, if all goes to plan, I think we'd be able to start offering those funds sometime in the fall. And so this would essentially allow either a water district, a watershed group, a nonprofit to either hire staff on a term limited basis to work through, whether it's initial design, permitting processes, grant writing, all of those steps that lead up to actually submitting an application and drawing down funds. So either hiring term limited staff. In addition, CWCB will be using some of these funds to hire a contractor to sort of offer, to loan out those services so that an organization doesn't necessarily need to hire somebody and manage that process themselves. We could loan the time of a contractor to work through those very same things. And so sort of provides two different pathways for everyone to go after these funds. And as Andy said, the Colorado River District is offering a similar grant program for those in their district, which I think is great, and totally agree. It's a complementary service, and really glad to see the district doing that. But so more to come on that front, but we're really optimistic that this fits really well into the gap that everyone here is talking about, and that this will really give us a leg up in being more competitive with California, Utah, other Western states in going after these federal funds. The other, big gap that we often see in trying to draw down federal funds is the ability for small organizations, local governments, nonprofits to meet the matching requirements of federal grants. And so the governor's office has received, thanks to Senate Bill 215 this past year, $80 million, of which only $60 million has actually been authorized for spending in this coming year. So the legislature put $80 million in the fund and said you can spend 60 of it this coming year, but it's intended to serve as the matching portion for state agencies and local governments and tribes. Unfortunately, nonprofits are not eligible for funding under that. And the governor's office is working on establishing a process for this new fund, and I think we expect that to be announced a bit later this summer, early fall. But the expectation or the structure is that local governments, state agencies would apply directly to the governor's office, who controls the fund, who would then release funds to meet the matching requirements of grants. And with that, happy to answer questions. I'm not sure if Lauren wants to talk first or if folks have questions right now. I think Aaron was first and then Terry.
Oh, thanks, Nate. So one question I had was about Senate Bill 215. And in the legislation, it calls out that 25% of the money will be used for, water, environmental, and resiliency projects. I've heard that the governor's office maybe doesn't feel like that percentage is binding, and that they can spend it however they want. So I'm curious, because it says 25%, if it's actually 25% or if it's what the governor wants to use it on.
Yeah, so it's a great question. And the expectation is that those percentages are not binding. They were based on sort of initial estimates of where the matching need exists sort of across all of these sectors. And, I've read the bill and I do not believe they're binding. And so I think it's, it really is at the governor's office discretion over time. And I think there's a reporting requirement that the actual allocations be made public, every year over the next few years. But I do not believe those percentages are binding.
Yeah, so my question is, how do we address Tabor? A lot of these projects are pretty big projects. And many of the entities receiving that money may have a Tabor problem to be able to receive that extra money.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any suggestions on that?
So it's a great question, and it's a legitimate concern. So I think with federal funds, they generally, to the extent we're drawing down federal funds, that would not sort of count under the Tabor limit.
Okay.
To the extent the state is providing support to an entity that is, a division of government, they would need to make sure not to cross the 10% threshold of total funding with state support.
So these would be considered federal funds then?
So the funds that we are offering for grants, yes, those are federal funds. So American Rescue Plan Act funds.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, and maybe, Lauren, maybe you will cover this, and please, if you do, let me know. But one of the things that I think it's a little bit challenging too is the timing of the match. it's a chicken, you know? It's like, you can't get CWCB funds unless you have a pretty good assurance that you have those federal funds, and kind of the other way around too. So I'm wondering if there's some thought about the timing and the requirements. How sure do you need to be that you're going to get that federal funding before you can have state funds committed, even if they're contingently committed? But that's been a little bit of a challenge, is to that chicken and egg.
Yeah. And so I'll speak at least to the Senate Bill 215. Like I know the governor's office is working through that question now of sort of exactly what type of documentation they would need from a state agency or local government to, be relatively certain that the money they're offering is truly what unlocks the federal funds, that they're at the threshold, and that this matching dollar amount sort of gets us all the way there. I'm sure there will be instances where it's not so clear, and I can't speak to exactly the direction they'll take that, but I know that they're giving that a lot of consideration, and maybe Lauren can speak to how CWCB handles that.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good question, and something that a lot of our grant applicants struggle with for any grant that they put in for CWCB, and we try and work with everybody and be reasonable to the best that we can be. As far as the capacity building grants, I mean, those are really geared at providing funding to local entities to come up with a federal grant application. So I think the expectation there is that kind of the final deliverable will be an application to a federal grant program, if that makes sense. So, it's really helping you get to the point where you're asking for the federal match.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's a question of timing, and and I love to hear if the CWCB is willing to, and I agree with you. Quite often we can work it out, but maybe there is a little bit more assurance that the state match will be there. If you do get the federal money, you don't have to prove that you have the federal money in order to get the state match.
Right. So, I mean, one of the things I was going to talk about was, let me just start from the top,
Sure,
and then
sure.
You can, if I don't quite answer your question, you can pick me again. So I guess just to offer a little bit more color to what Nate just covered on 1379, which provides us funding for both watershed restoration and then the capacity building side of the grants. As Nate mentioned, our board is going to be considering the criteria and guidelines for the grants that would go out directly to local communities. So there'll be about $2.5 million that we'll provide in direct grants to help folks on the ground with capacity building, and then another $2.5 million that we'll be looking to hire contract support. So if an entity knows that they need help with a grant application to the federal government for a program, either IIJA or some other federal funding, they can work with a contractor that we hire, so they don't actually have to apply for a grant and hire their own staff person. So we were trying to cast the broadest net possible and try and be responsive to the needs we were hearing in communities, both those that wanted to actually hire people on staff, they can apply for a capacity building grant, or if they just want some technical support in actually drafting the application. So that's the in-house contracting support that CWCB is planning on providing. So hopefully, we'll have that moving in July, and we can start accepting applications for our grant program shortly thereafter in the fall, hopefully, is our timeline. And then the other ARPA funds that we received through House Bill 1379 is $10 million for watershed restoration. And I believe we're still kind of working out the color of funding for that, kind of what box we're going to be able to check.
Yeah,
for the ARPA funding.
So I know that, Chris Sturm is planning to bring proposed guidance to the board during the September meeting.
Yeah.
And I think the expectation is that it would be eligible for post-fire watershed restoration needs, as well as sort of pre-fire, wildfire-ready watershed type work.
Right, that's
well,
right. And I think what Chris is kind of working towards is using that funding to kind of align with the work that he's doing in the wildfire-ready watersheds, which is really to identify the areas that are most at risk and where we can get the biggest bang for our buck. And so you can expect to see more on that in September, kind of once we work through the details of ARPA funding and what that looks like. No surprise to any of you, but federal funding comes with some strings attached. So the other thing that I wanted to cover that I think came up maybe from Lisa Darling is about the regional grant coordinators that CPW received legislative approval to hire this last legislative session. So we have 7 total FTE. 4 of those will be regional grant managers that will live and work in the community is our concept, that will really help communities identify grant projects that would be eligible for the water plan grant program in CWCB, and really work with folks in the communities to develop applications and, explain our process, try and play a little bit of a matchmaker with what funding CWCB offers, if it's water plan grant, what can be used as a match, what can't be, how it fits within the water plan and the basin implementation plan goals and objectives. So we're really trying to be more proactive rather than just passive and responsive in that grant program, because we know, again, that capacity is really an issue out there. So that's one way that we're trying to be responsive to that, in addition to the ARPA funding that we received. The way we're planning on divvying those 4 grant managers up is to have 1 cover the South Platte metro area, 1 in the Arkansas, 1 in the Rio Grande and Southwest, and then the final person to cover the Colorado Gunnison and Yampa White Green basins. So we wish we had more people to spread around the state, but that was our thought about how to kind of divvy up the basins. And then in addition to those folks, we have a couple people that we're able to hire to provide contract support so that we can hopefully work through that bottleneck a little bit more smoothly and efficiently. Because we know that that is a challenge, both for everyone out there in the world and also for us. So we're hoping that helps. I'm not exactly sure when those positions are going to be posted, but as soon as possible. I think you can expect to see them advertised this summer for sure. So keep your eyes out, and we'll make sure that we send around those position descriptions, because our hope is that we can get some really knowledgeable, capable people that are already living and working in the communities and are aware of the project needs in the basins. So we're super excited about that. And then the last thing that I wanted to cover that is related is just the water plan grant funding that we received appropriated this past legislative session. And it's notable because it's the first revenue that we've received from Proposition DD. So that was authorized in 2019. And then we are implementing that program kind of in an arrears model where we're waiting to collect the funding so that we know actually what we have and then ask for the appropriation. So that's why you saw a little bit of the delay. So this is the first DD money that's going out the door. We put 7.2 million of DD into the water plan grant fund, and then supplemented that with an additional $1 million from the CWCB's construction fund. So for a total of 8.2 million. The grant deadline is going to be August 1, and then we'll have another grant round December 1. And we sought guidance from our board at this last board meeting this summer, just for how we would break down that funding into the various water plan grant categories. And I'll run through that quickly. For the agriculture bucket, we're aiming to fund about $1.5 million worth of projects. For the engagement and innovation bucket, about $500,000. The environment and watershed category, $4.2 million worth of funding. And then for storage and supply, we're planning on allocating about $2 million. And the reason that the environment and watershed category seems disproportionately larger is because we went through a grant consolidation effort over the past couple of years at the CWCB, where we combined the Watershed Restoration Grant Program into the Water Plan Grant Program with the commitment that we would continue to fund those category of projects at the same funding level. So we're trying to, be true to that commitment that we made, which is why you see a little bit more funding in that bucket. The other thing about the Water Plan Grant program that I wanted to mention is that we're envisioning that can potentially be a match for the non-federal portion of any funding, whether it's infrastructure funding or other federal funds out there, as long as it qualifies for our grant program. That can be part of the non-federal match for those. So I think that's all I plan to cover. If there are any questions for me or for Nate. Yeah.
Can you repeat the storage bucket number?
2 million.
2.
Yep.
I have one question on the Watershed Restoration funding. I believe that was 10 million.
Yep.
Knowing that most of our watersheds are on U.S. Forest Service land, is there any agreements with, or have we reached out to the U.S. Forest Service to be able to access those forests to do treatments?
So I might punt some of this to Dan, but we know that that's been a challenge. I think it's hard for the state to fund projects on federal property. But I know Dan and the State Forest Service have really been working hard at that
Yeah.
conundrum.
We actually, just recently, I can't remember which bill, I think it was the updated furworm program, but we took away the prohibition that state funds could not be used on federal lands. So it just can't, there's a certain percentage where it can't be like all the federal lands, but we can now come in and be a partner. You know, this community is a perfect example. You could walk where I live, you know, like a mile away up the hill, across the street, it's Breckenridge open space land that then goes to Summit County open space land that goes to U.S. Forest Service land. And we have a whole bunch of piles that need to be burned. That's kind of a patchwork quilt between like federal lands and, you know, local government lands. There's some private lands mixed in there as well. But we want to look through a lens of, you know, what's the need around the state and not just through the ownership boundaries that exist. So there's no prohibition right now on using those on federal lands.
Yeah, I was thinking more, instead of the prohibition of utilizing the funding, is accessing the lands to do treatments. Now, I know we did it with the Monarch project. The Upper District was able to do that. But that was under the Farm Bill at the time, which allowed certain amounts, I can't remember, 3,000 acres limitation or something in these small areas where they would do in-house programmatic EAs. The feds would do that to open up some of these lands so that we could actually do the treatments.
Yeah.
That's what I was referring to, not so much the spending of the money itself. And I don't know,
Okay.
it'd be nice to have some kind of a protocol cooperation between states and feds so that we could look at some of these areas above our reservoirs and so forth.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. So to answer your question now, we do have a shared stewardship MOU in place, the state of Colorado, the State Forest Service and the U.S. Forest Service. I've had some discussions with the Bureau of Land Management to try to replicate that too. So we have shared landscapes that we look at to say, okay, we all need to work together on these locations. And the U.S. Forest Service forest boundaries are also working internally on what's called the PODS concept. So the PODS reflect where are those values at risk, whether it's watershed components or whether it's where communities and neighborhoods are close to it, and where potential areas that would be good to do prescribed fire, frankly, like and utilize the term appropriate management response. So where are those areas that you need to put everything in because there's critical watershed areas that you need to put the fire out right away, but where are those areas that actually for beneficial use you can let it burn a little bit if it's away from, you know, critical areas. So we're doing a mapping exercise currently that's looking at the state. It's also looking at what landscapes are NEPA approved. So what's even, you know, remotely, if there's funding available that you could get in and do work. And then a matrix too that reflects what private land folks have done work, what federal, what tribal lands, what state lands, what you know, water provider type lands like Denver Water does a lot of work too, and Aurora and so forth. But to have that whole matrix, and then you can figure out, okay, what's been done, but then where are the gaps? And believe it or not, we've never done this exercise, and it's other states are looking at what we're doing in Colorado, which I think is forward thinking to say the least. Yep. Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, let's have a little break. Let's have about a 10-minute break and come back, and then we will start up with the, how about we'll do the Basin Roundtable discussion with Bob, Jason, and Emma, and I believe that they're gonna come up in front for that. So, so let's take a little break and we'll come back. for about 10 minutes.
Barbara,
All right.
Melly, Pat.
You're the only one that has.
Jim Yon.
We're gonna go.
Start with you? Okay. Okay, everyone. We'll get started here in just a second. Okay. Next, we have Basin Roundtable Representative Panel with Bob Peters, Jason Turner, and Emma Resner. And to kind of go over, some of the lessons learned, innovative ideas, and things to consider for us, really. So I think we're going to turn it over, Bob, to you first. Yep. Okay, the floor is yours. Yep.
Okay. Green light is on. Can everybody hear me? No. No.
Keep going.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe a little bit closer.
There you go. So I wanted to tell you about a process that we've been working on with the Metro and the South Platte Basin Roundtables to allow the roundtables to take a more active role in implementing projects from the BIP and to implement those goals and measurable outcomes that we've got in the report. And I know that if many of you have been involved in development of the BIPs, and everybody knows that they were a lot of work, but there's a lot of really good stuff in them, and it would really be a shame for them to go unused. So we were really thinking that it would be great to allow the roundtables to have some influence on, what projects get completed so that we can tackle those goals that we set forth in the plan. And I've had the good fortune of working with the joint steering committee that we had for the BIP and the M&I subcommittee, and thanks to Barbara Biggs and for giving me the opportunity to work on that, and my leadership at Denver Water, Greg and Rick Marzacek, really appreciate that. And then Lisa Darling sits on our M&I subcommittee as well. So it's been great working with you, Lisa, on that. We thought, what is a good way to allow the roundtables to jump in and develop their own projects? We do want to maintain the ability for outside projects to take advantage of the funding that's always been available. So we set up a process that I wanted to take you through. I think I can pull it up on the slide here. Okay. So, yeah, there we go. So the philosophy is that projects should have some basin-wide appeal, have some multiple beneficiaries, maybe like studies or research, or maybe environmental and recreation projects that have multiple beneficiaries. And we wanted to make sure that the process was transparent and, so that everybody knew what was going on with all the projects, and that they got fully vetted. So it really starts with, and it's on the slide here, it starts on the left with step one, which is with the subcommittees. So we've got 4 subcommittees between the 2 roundtables. And the idea here is that they would come up with projects that they recommend coming out of the BIP or from the projects list, like the studies or the research that they want to see go forward. The one thing that we wouldn't want to do is pick specific entities' water supply projects. We don't feel like the roundtable needs to be involved in those. We let those entities, come to the roundtable for funding for those if they see that need. So with this group of projects from the subcommittees, then the full roundtable would look at those and come up with a prioritized list of the top projects that they want to see go forward. And then one of the key things is next, which is getting people to step up and say, hey, I want to help shepherd this project along. So hopefully we can form small groups of people that will shepherd projects and develop the scopes of work and solicit them to contractors or universities or NGOs to do the work and figure out the fund matching and picking the grantees for those projects. And then that project package would come to the roundtable and plug right into the WSRF process that we already have in place. And then ultimately they'd go through that process and get compared with the other projects that might come in the door to the roundtable, like they always have. So we vetted this process across both roundtables, and we looked at it in a couple of different subcommittees, the Pepo, the ENR. They've been looking at this. And of course, we kind of developed this in the M&I subcommittee. And so I think it offers up a good opportunity for us to have some influence on projects and to tackle those goals that we have in the BIP. You know, we're only going to get out of it really what we put into it. So getting people to step up and help out is going to be really key for this. So that's all I have. I'm happy to take any questions now or later.
So early on, Arkansas Basin Roundtable did something similar to this. What we had to do, though, is we had to come up with a fiscal agent. So how are you addressing the fiscal agent, since the roundtable is not an entity per se,
right,
with an FEIN and so forth? So how are you going to address that?
I think there's a couple of ways we can deal with that. So number one, if we get folks from the roundtable to step up, hopefully they represent an agency that could take on that role, or the contractor that was selected could take on that role as well. So I think there's a couple of options there.
Any more questions? Yeah, Millie?
Have you actually done it? You haven't implemented any of this yet?
No, we haven't
Okay,
done it
okay.
yet. We're hoping that we can get started on this year, and then hopefully by March, we have a March 15th, 2023 deadline for our first cycle for next year. So hopefully we can develop some projects before then.
I was just curious how you deal with the conflicting, because I hear that you do turn down some projects. So how do you deal with, you know, insider projects versus outsider projects?
Yeah, that's a good question, Melly. And Barbara had that concern early on. And so, you know, because the projects, you know, come from the subcommittees and then they're brought to the full roundtable, they see the light of day early on. And then they get to see the light of day again when they go through the WSRF process. So we feel like it's pretty transparent. It should, you know, give anybody an opportunity to raise any red flags if there's any conflicts with any projects. And like I said, we really do want to maintain the ability for the outside projects to come in like they always have. And of course, any WSRF project, you know, funding grant has to go before the CWCB for approval. So there's that check and balance built in as well. So yeah, that's how we're proposing to handle that consideration.
Lisa?
Of course. So Bob, I'm sorry if you had mentioned this and I missed it, but Melly, we're planning on trying to do an allocation, right, of the total funds. So we're going to have money available for outside WSRF and this process. So we're going to try to aim for, you know, we're going to try to just see how it works out, but perhaps we'll move towards, you know, a 50% through these projects and reserving 50% for the others, or 75-25, depending on how that goes. So it's just going to be kind of an iterative process.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Well, we just got through this last funding process and didn't get any grant requests.
Right.
Back in March of this year. So, you know, had this process been in place, we would have had some funds to do something with. So.
Great. Any more questions? Okay, seeing none, we're gonna go with Emma next, or Jason? Jason, you wanna go next? And then Emma, okay. And yeah,
Thanks.
please introduce yourself too, so everyone knows.
Sure.
Yep.
I'm Jason Turner. I'm presently the chair of the Colorado Basin Roundtable. I also have a little side hustle as in-house legal counsel for the Colorado River District.
We do it slightly differently.
But I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you a little bit about what the roundtable's been up to since we submitted our BIP in January. Our roundtable, obviously, we looked at the basin as a whole, but we also approached our BIP from a sub-basin level. So we broke that up into Grand County, Summit, Eagle River, State Bridge, the Middle Colorado, Roaring Fork, and then the Grand Valley. And we then established and assigned regional leads for each of those sub-basins to go out and interact with the water users and to speak with them about their projects, what they needed in their sub-basin. That process resulted in 321 total projects in the BIP, with a total of $4 billion in estimated costs. And those are consumptive and non-consumptive projects. That $4 billion only includes those in which we had numbers for. So it's probably in excess of that. So we are currently going through a process where we're looking at all these projects, putting an emphasis kind of on those projects that have multiple benefits in the basin, but also looking at projects that are shovel ready or close to shovel ready, and looking at the various funding mechanisms under the federal infrastructure bill. And so we've kind of created a matrix in where we think this project fits, in which bucket. And then the plan is then to reach out to the proponents of those projects and try to move those projects forward. We're very early on in this process. And also to direct folks, Andy mentioned earlier, those accelerator grants, and to make people aware of those in our basin and try to be a catalyst to move some of these projects forward. So that's what we've been up to.
Any questions, Jason? I have a question. So if someone, as you've identified, and you said over what, 300 or so?
Yeah, 321.
321. A subsection of that, like, does your staff also take a hard look at those and say, like, hey, if you change the wording or a little bit just different scope here or there, you have maybe better scoring, or kind of coach the folks to offer that expertise, that technical expertise that
we haven't gotten into this so much, but we do that with our WSRF grants. We have what's called the Next Steps Committee, and prior to taking a grant request to the roundtable as a whole, it goes through that Next Steps Committee, and we try to provide some guidance there, how you might want to approach this a little bit better, how it could fit into potentially more buckets. Yeah. So yeah, we do that work on the front end before we present anything to the roundtable as a whole.
I think I forgot last to ask if anyone online had any questions too, but sometimes it's hard to see, if you have your hand raised or whatever, but just feel free to speak up too if there are any questions for folks that are online. Oh, you're watching? Oh, okay, good. Okay, perfect. Good, thank you. Okay, good. Well, thanks so much. Emma, you're up next.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I'm Emma Reeser, Director of the Rio Grande Headwaters Restoration Project, and also Vice Chair for the Rio Grande Basin Roundtable. And yeah, it's been great to be here and listen into the conversation. A lot of the same conversations happening in the Rio Grande Basin that all the other basins are having around funding and projects as we've completed our updated BIP. And the Rio Grande Basin Roundtable has a long history of supporting projects that meet multiple needs from a wide range of sponsors. It's something we really pride ourselves in as a basin, as being a basin that gets stuff done and implements projects on the ground, and to meet multiple water challenges and needs. But I think the BIP process and then the update process that we just finished really has just accelerated those conversations, and any planning process brings people together, engages with diverse stakeholders, and helps us understand each other better. And I think that has helped the basin identify projects and support each other in lifting those projects up. So the value in planning, really bringing people together, understanding different perspectives, building those relationships, and then developing goals around those concerns and challenges that reach across the whole spectrum. And that all leads to projects. And as a basin, the Rio Grande Basin has put a high emphasis on multi-benefit projects and projects that meet multiple needs. That's really kind of the top thing we talk about with any project, is how can we make it work for more water users, meet multiple benefits, how can we push each other to benefit as much as we can. And I think, with the updated BIP, we didn't have quite as many projects as the Colorado, but I think what spoke to it is a majority of our projects were all meeting multiple needs. And so I think that's something that really speaks to the types of projects that the basin has come up with as priorities. And I think the roundtable has been really thoughtful in how we can collaborate across water uses to meet multiple needs. And this has really, I think, allowed us to leverage our money and make the money go further. Leveraging CWCB, WSRF dollars with local, private, federal dollars so that we can get more projects done on the ground. And this is something we continually are talking about. How can we bring more match to the table? How can we support all of our stakeholders and partners so that we can actually get more projects done? And I think a good example of this is when a ditch company comes to the roundtable with a need for a new headgate or a diversion. The executive committee, the roundtable will really help brainstorm ideas, and maybe there's a partnership with the Rio Grande Headwaters Restoration Project that we can help get some federal funding or some other match to by making sure the project has some environmental benefits or recreation benefits, and maybe the Division of Water Resources can provide some input that would improve water administration, and before you know it, you have this project that really touches on a lot of things, and those conversations really happen at the roundtable level and with the executive committee. So I think the roundtable really is a forum, and I think something we really a forum to support projects as best we can. It's something we spend a lot of time thinking about and talking about, and how we can encourage and support ideas and relationships, connecting people to make sure these projects can happen. We put a lot of time into that, and a lot of volunteer time and hours. So the conversation around capacity, I think, is really timely and important, especially looking towards the coming years and the federal infrastructure funding and how we can utilize that. We know it's going to be a big lift, and how can we make sure we have the staff capacity as a community to make it happen. And I think it's something where we have some great examples in the basin of how we're already trying to build up capacity to be able to support that. And one example is the Rio Grande Headwaters Restoration Project has grown in the last few years from a staff of 2 to 4. And that's really in response to a lot of these growing needs, with both supporting the roundtable and partners like ditch companies and landowners that have these really critical projects but don't have the capacity or the ability to write grants and get those done on the ground. And kind of to emphasize the importance of that across the basin, all of the water districts, the San Luis Valley Water Conservancy District, the Caneos, Nathan's District, and the Rio Grande Water Conservation District all give the restoration project staff capacity funding each year, recognizing that in turn, we can write grants and help get those projects done on the ground. But the needs just keeps growing. And so I think the need for continued capacity is going to just continue to grow into the future. And so, yeah, I think it takes a lot of time and energy, but it's also great that we're all friends and enjoy hanging out together. And really setting aside time to get all the partners together to think through what are each organization and each entity's project needs, what are the funding sources, and who should be going after what, so we're not competing against each other, but supporting each other in those efforts. And I think that's leading to lots of funding being able to be spent on the ground and hopefully more into the future.
Great, thank you, Emma. That's great. Any questions for Emma or the other two panelists that spoke previously? Going once, going twice. No? Great. Well, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. Lauren Riss, you want to come up quick? Just for clarification statement, I think.
In my earlier presentation, I said that our water plan grant application deadline was August 1, and I'm so sorry to give those out there working on grant applications false hope that they had an additional month. I was incorrect, and the deadline is actually July 1st. So, my deepest apologies. Tomorrow. That's right. So sorry. My bad. The grant application deadline is July 1st. Tomorrow. Keep writing. Yes.
Yeah, tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah. Okay. Okay, next up we have work plan subcommittee and Pepo report and open discussion. And Aaron and Lisa, I believe, will kick this off. And I just really appreciate their leadership in stepping up and being co-chairs of the subcommittee. So the floor is yours whenever you're ready. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. You know, if you need a few more minutes? Yeah. Let's, actually, Becky, do you want to give Colorado River update? Okay, let's move to Becky and then we'll move to you two after. Yep.
Everyone can hear me, even those in the virtual world. For miles and miles. Ken, you happen to be the highlight on the screen, just so you know. So you're like the main one. So while we pull up the slides, I want to kind of talk a bit about some of the most recent things that have been in the news as it relates to the Colorado River. You probably heard on June 14th, Commissioner Camille Touton, Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation, testified before the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, really regarding drought conditions across the country, across the West. And obviously it became a focus on the Colorado River. She stated that an additional 2 to 4 million acre feet of water would be necessary to protect critical infrastructure at Lake Mead and Lake Powell, and that she was considering taking unilateral action if needed to achieve this. It really sent ripples across the basin. We, we should not use any water words as we're talking about ripples, but it did get people a little on edge. You can probably predict that it got us on edge here in the Upper Basin too, and I want to talk a little bit about why it got us so on edge. And I think first and foremost, her statements were clear. It would come from every state, every sector, and they were comfortable taking unilateral action if the states didn't come up with a plan together. So I think I think it's important to really focus on some of the language that was used, and it was nuanced. I think that she did use the term demand management or manage of demand. And I think that was part of the reason why we got a little bit anxious for the folks that are not in the weeds on it on a daily basis. You've probably heard, some of the status of where we are on demand management in the state of Colorado, and you probably thought, oh, they're targeting us. That's not necessarily the case, and I want to make sure that we make that clear up here. When we talk about management of demand, it's a broader. It's really a management of consumptive use. And so, speaking of consumptive use, I want to kind of share some numbers, which I think really highlight where a lot of the issue is. And when we talk about this unilateral action, where the solution is. And so the numbers that you see in front of you are just for the last few years. There's not, when we look at the last 20 years, these are pretty consistent numbers for the lower basin. The upper basin, we all know this because we live it every day. We are responsive to hydrology in real time, right? So when it is not there, we don't take it. When it is there, we do. And we put it to good beneficial use that is productive, not only within our state, but the other upper basin states. And it really, the water is hugely impactful on our local economy. So I want to kind of highlight a few things. In 2019, the lower basin used 9.35 million acre feet, basically. In 2020, the lower basin used 9.6 approximately million acre feet. In 2021, 9.9, almost 10 million actually. And predicted uses in 2022 are 9.879. If you look in the upper basin, I want to highlight a couple big things. In 2019, 4.5 million, that's less than half of what the lower basin used in the entire upper basin. Again, 2020, 4.46 million acre feet in the upper basin. Again, less than half of what the lower basin used. The number I really want to focus on, though, is the difference between 2020 and 2021, the 4.5 to about 3.5 million acre feet. And that really represents a 1 million acre foot reduction in use. And I don't want to misrepresent that. That is a direct result of hydrology. We can't say that that's some sort of active conservation, but conservation is, we haven't used it. And so, because it isn't available. And I think building a structure and a system that is flexible based on what is there and what is available is important for all folks that rely on the Colorado River. So I had to highlight those numbers just because I think wherever we can get an audience of these facts and numbers, I think it really points to the direction that we have to, that the feds have to look at when we talk about where contributions of that very broad range of 2 to 4 million acre feet will have to come from. I'd like to get credit for that 2020 to 2021, but I highly doubt that will occur. But we know that that's going to be about the same predictive numbers in the upper basin again this year. So we do know that the majority of those contributions have to come from the lower basin just based on those facts, but we also recognize that it has to be a collaborative effort. And so while we feel like we are not the majority of any problem, that doesn't mean we're not willing to be a part of the solution. But the only way we're willing to be a part of the solution is also that it doesn't tie our hands for future. And I think that's incredibly future operations and how we do things. I also want to take a minute. You can go the next slide.
Becky, really quick. For the lower
Oh, go
basin,
back
the lower basin numbers, obviously, we're still in 2022, but is that what's projected, or is that?
That's what's projected. They put in requests basically, and so those are projected numbers.
In our upper basin, or
Yes,
what?
that
you think?
includes Mexico.
Yeah, I did want to point out, just so when people are talking about this in the public, that includes just shy of 1.5 million a year, holding pretty steady for the country of Mexico. So the states in the lower basin are 1.5 million less than that number. It's just the way that the easiest way to measure consumptive use coming out of the Hoover Dam is to portray it this way, and it's totally accurate. But keep in mind, there's a Mexico delivery in there, and it. Only other thing I would say, I'm sorry to get a little in the weeds, it doesn't include all the lower basins tributary use. Right?
Yes.
So that is not their entire use of Colorado River water by any means. There's another 1 to 2 million acre feet of consumptive use by the lower basin coming out of tributaries. It's way more than what we use in the upper basin.
Becky, isn't the story here to tell also that in 2021, for instance, we just experienced poor hydrology, fewer water molecules. Our prior appropriation systems in the upper basin were working to reflect that. And I find it curious that you can actually project what the lower basin's deliveries are going to be in 2022, which is, again, the luxury of having a big storage bucket above you to make those deliveries predictably. We don't have that predictability in our upper basin because we don't have that, and we're relying on snowpack, right?
Yep, and Pat, we're going to bring you in to write the next press release. So thank you for that. So it'll probably be about probably similar to 2021 is what we're thinking. Yes, Carlisle. Oh, you got to pick a touchy subject, don't you? So you want to, not necessarily, and that one's a complicated one also. So the EVAP is definitely something that we need to be thinking about as we go into the future and how that's accounted for, where it's accounted for, return flows also unaccounted for return flow. There's a lot of things that we need to be thinking about. So while this number does include Mexico, it doesn't include a lot of other things. And so I think that's important to focus on. Yes, Terry.
So Becky, you're saying consumptive use. How do you calculate that? Or are these just deliveries?
So these are not our, I want to tell you, these aren't our independent numbers. These numbers are coming from the Bureau of Reclamation. And so that is, am I right on this, Andy? I'm phoning a friend, that it is deliveries, but there's often times where they can request and then not take it, and it's not counted against them, and then they'll get it later.
Yeah, Terry, just to clarify, and I think Commissioner Mitchell's right, but it most of the lower basin uses are 100% consumptive.
Yeah.
So think of our trans-basin diversion.
So it's delivered. So it's just like, yeah.
But there are a couple, like Palo Verde Irrigation District, that has return flows. That number on the lower basin only reflects their total consumption. So it's diversion less return flow. So it's a pretty accurate number from that perspective.
So it's basically a mixture of deliveries plus, in some cases, it's actual consumption.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can we go to the next slide now? And we can go back to this one if we need. I'm sure we will. And so I want to talk a bit about, you obviously see that the majority of contributions are going to have to come from the lower basin states. But again, I think we have to be a bit of the solution and do our part. I want to highlight some of what we have already done to protect the critical infrastructure and what it means. So you saw the reductions in consumptive use in that the year between 2020 and 2021. And then there's going to be ongoing reductions based on available water supply. So I think that that's important to focus on. Then we're also a part of in the Upper Basin states providing the 500,000 acre feet of water through April 2023 from Flaming Gorge Reservoir to protect those critical elevations at Lake Powell. It's important to recognize this is on top of the emergency release that was done of 161,000 acre feet from Flaming Gorge. And those of you in the Gunnison Basin remember the Blue Mesa Reservoir releases also. That was done last summer. So when we talk about that 661,000 acre feet is on top of those consumptive use reductions that are already taken. So I think there are a lot of things to be proud of in terms of our being a part of the solution already. Being perfectly honest, that doesn't mean that there won't likely be additional drought response operations agreement releases to come primarily from Flaming Gorge. If you're in the Gunnison Basin, you know there's not much more to give there. You know the impact that had on the community. We know the impact that it had on recreational income for that community at a really critical time. And so when we talk about additional reductions, I think when we see our communities responding like we did in 2020 and 2021, my greatest concern, and I hope this is you all's greatest concern also, is that we don't want to hit a tipping point where folks can't come back from. Where our small and local communities we can't give so much or be so much a part of the solution that we become it's unviable to go back to our previous, kind of the way we functioned as a community and how much relies on kind of all of us working together. And so we're really thinking about that, in every corner of the state. When I think about the southwest corner of the state specifically, I think about what is the tipping point there. I think there's some really heavy things that have already gone on in the southwest corner of the state, just due to them being so affected by the drought in ways that we all have been affected, but there was some really heavy effects that were shown in the southwest corner of the state. So I want you all to just hear that as you hear the pushes for us to be a huge part of the solution. I think we have to be. I think there's no way not to be, but I think it's important to remember the fragility that we are already experiencing across the state. So I also want to highlight the ongoing efforts that are happening in terms of intrastate conservation efforts across all the Upper Basin states. If you're in Colorado, you know some of what's happening on the ground. Already, much of it was highlighted in the water plan, which I don't know if you've heard. It comes in the draft comes out today. It's kind of a big deal. And so, but there are efforts like that happening across the entire Upper Basin. And when we talk about the drought resiliency toolkit that the board, some of them are the CWCB board, some of them are here today, approved. Really, that was intended to be a shift to get onto that local level, making sure we're able to respond to the hydrology and the current situations that we're in. I think that is a positive thing across not only Colorado, but the entire basin. So that's kind of the update. Where I want to highlight a couple things when we talked about the unilateral action. I don't want to spend too much time on it. It's obviously of concern when any federal agency says unilateral action, right? Nobody wants to hear that. I want to make sure that we're very clear here that we're not contemplating any curtailment or involuntary cuts in the upper basin. While Commissioner Tootin did mention the possibility of that lateral action, I think it's also important to remember where authority lies, and that the Bureau's authority is much more expansive in the lower basin than it is in the upper basin. And that's partly what Pat talked about in terms of we've been managing ourselves with our prior appropriation system and how we administer that, the regulation with that, and I think being really responsible stewards. So it's important to really focus on that. The states have that exclusive authority in the upper basin to administer and distribute waters throughout their state. That's different than the lower basin, where the secretary is the water master, and that the authority is broader in the lower basin than it is in the upper basin. Again, I have to note that the upper basin has always been in compliance with the compact. And we're currently using that 3 to 4 million range. And that's about 3 to 4 million, oftentimes less than we were apportioned. So compact administration is not occurring. And so this is quickly moving. And I'm going to continue to provide updates wherever we can get a microphone, and whether I need it or not, and make sure that we try to keep folks in Colorado comfortable, recognizing that these are troubling times for not only Coloradans but everyone across the American West and Mexico and all the folks that rely on the Colorado River. So I will take as many questions as you want. I don't want to take too much time from Aaron. Actually, I don't care. But if you guys have any questions on this, the CWCB board has been incredibly helpful as advisors on this, and we're trying to keep everyone up to date also, but it is quickly moving. So I appreciate everybody's time.
Questions? Yeah, Stan.
Well, Director Mitchell, this is exactly what I was hoping to hear today, because we get all questions at the roundtable and otherwise about some of these things, and not picking on this subcommittee, it said could have updates on what was happening. And I think this is a should, because it's something that really helps. And, you know, the other side of stuff as I look at it, and I don't know what plans are in the mix, but from a public relations standpoint, you know, I got slammed when I saw the first thing from CBS was, you know, Lake Powell, you get a minute. The only people they interviewed was basically the park ranger and somebody that wanted to get rid of Lake Powell. And, you know, that's kind of a restricted group. And I'm hoping, and maybe we're going to hit this on Pepo and some other things, really a public relations rollout is necessary. In the first place is right here. And I think you hit right on point what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stan. I thank you for bringing up kind of the media piece of things. That is not to be too emotional, but it gets a little bit frustrating oftentimes, because but I do feel like we're starting to get a broader audience of understanding of how the Upper Basin works, how Lake Powell works, how Lake Mead works. And once it's at Lake Powell, I mean, we're not drawing anything down. And so that responsibility, I think there's been many misperceptions of what our roles are in the problem and what our roles should be in the solution. And so we have really been focusing on getting the information out that defines what the system looks like, what our roles are, how proactive we have already been in Colorado and across the Upper Basin states. And I think we often talk about it as a simple math problem. You probably may recall I was at the Arkansas Forum, and we do consider it very, very simple. Like this year is a perfect example. There were predictions ranging between 6 and 6.4 going into Lake Powell, and we're still having 7 million acre feet go out. When you have consecutive years of more going out of a reservoir than going in, there's a problem there. And being, having some engineering background, a mass balance is one of the things you must know how to do. And this one is with simple inputs and outputs. And so I think it's important to remember that. And it's the same thing at Lake Mead. What is going out is greater than what's coming in. And there's and lies the problem.
Other questions? Yeah, Aaron? And then Carlisle.
Appreciate the update. Appreciate the update. I'm curious, because that was all, the way you've summarized it from a simple mathematical perspective, obviously it's more complicated than that, but it is very logical that it needs to be a collaborative approach, but a substantial amount of the conservation needs to come from the 10 million acre feet that's being used. How is that message being received, or is there open communication with the lower basin states, who presumably have a counter message about why they should not be bearing more burden? And we've heard that from Arizona, who obviously are already bearing a significant burden. So what's that conversation looking like between the upper basin and the lower basin right now?
I think there has been a shift that from previous kind of conversations. I think there's been, it may not be as great a shift as I would like to see, but I think it is, there has been a shift to recognizing that the numbers that we are talking about to save a system and the area, when we're talking about Lake Powell and Lake Mead, I think there has been a heavy awareness on where that burden has to be lifted. I wouldn't say they're comfortable conversations by any means, but I do think that there's a greater awareness now than there was in the past. That brings up, though, those initial units, and we are concerned that we look at Lake Mead as the checking account, Lake Powell as the savings account, and the initial units as like the credit cards that are being maxed out at this point, and no additional source of income predicted to come into the future. And so the recovery of all of those reservoirs is something that I think we cannot forget. And so as we look, and as these looks continue to come upstream and say, okay, what can we get from these initial units? I get more and more nervous about that, because as we know, in any debt scenario situation, it is much harder to get out of that than it was to get in it, and then how to rebuild into the future. And so I am urging as quick action as possible to reshape the way that the reliance has occurred across the basin, but specifically in the lower basin. My concern has been the reliance on that consistent outflows from Lake Powell and Lake Mead. Not that it's used when it's there, but the reliance that it will be there at the numbers that are greater than are going in. And so we have to live within our means. We absolutely have to live within our means. I think that goes beyond just the Colorado River system. It goes in everything that we do. And we need to be, immediately responsive to what Mother Nature provides. I don't care how good of a negotiator I think I am, and Andy's, you know, pretty tough and gives me lots of advice whenever I'll listen to him, and the board will do the same, and got lots of people that want to talk to me about it, and but we cannot negotiate with Mother Nature. We can't convince her to provide more. And so we had to figure out how to immediately respond to what she provides and create the flexibilities in our system that allow for that. So that is my stance on this. I don't foresee that changing. And I'm hoping that we can start moving others in that same direction.
Carlisle and then Al. And I think I can't tell, there's someone online as well, but let's have everyone internally here first. So Carlisle.
Thank you, Becky, for your comments. And you've kind of answered part of my question. My question involves the press coverage that came out of this announcement and the declaration, where we had a number of people, particularly in the lower basin, saying this is proof that the compact is broken and needs to be fixed. How do we address those type of issues with, you know, when the press drives so much of what goes on in Washington, D.C. and everywhere else? How do we turn that public relations factor around to let engineering take the lead rather than a few emotional statements by a few people?
I really think it goes back to the science. I think we've been trying to message in Colorado, and you may start, now that I call this out, you may start recognizing some of the nuances in our language now that I've highlighted kind of the way that we're trying to reshape the discussion. But it's really trying to focus on what is actually broken, and really trying to fix that. I think we have to really honor what the compact's original intentions were, and that was obviously to preserve our ability to develop into the future at the pace that we wanted to, and at the pace that we saw fit in the Upper Basin. And currently, I think we are being incredibly responsible by not out developing what Mother Nature provides, and at this point. And there are times that are tough, and there's times that are concerning, but we are very focused on living within the ideas that were built into the compact.
Director Gibbs, do you mind if I jump in on Carlisle's question real quick? Because a question I have for you, Becky, is there a role that the IBCC members or the water leaders can play? Because we all have local media outlets. We all, many of us have communication arms in helping with the message and helping get that out, even, maybe some of these talking points. Is that something you would request help from, or is that something when we get requests or we see an opportunity with our media outlets, we say, let's make a call to Director Mitchell and get her to tell that story? What's your preference there?
I think it's kind of all of the above. I think we're trying to get out as much of our message as we possibly can, but also trying to not create a target on us that is unnecessary at the same time, right? And so I think in a perfect world, I would say it's incredibly important that we stand together. That is the benefit that we have, not only in Colorado, but in the Upper Basin states, is that we all have some laurels that we can stand on. And so we are moving at an incredibly fast pace. And so oftentimes I'm not getting information out as quickly as my often OCD self would like to get it out. But we're committed to that so that you have some script to go off of. And you're always welcome to send them to me, but or any other leaders, but I think even joint things where it's really us standing together. If there's ways that we can stand together as a state, a little bit of insider baseball. I am not universally loved in some of our messaging and our statements, and so it's much easier in these difficult times when I can blame you all and really say that it's hard, and this is what I'm hearing from our water users, and this is what I'm hearing about what's happening in these corners of the state, and the demand across the state of Colorado, as we're talking about negotiations into the future, are that I focus on these and these and these things. And so when you guys say that, it actually helps me, because I can say, Pat, it says this, and the Arkansas Basin is focused on this, and what's important. And so it does significantly help me. There are folks in this room that I use pretty frequently to say, well, you heard so-and-so say this. We're focused on recreation, we're focused on environment, we're focusing on providing a secure supply for all of our water users, but we're also focused on making sure that we have viable agriculture into the future, and that Colorado, if we build Colorado in the way that is what we want, not the way that we're handed to. So, thank you.
I would just add, I mean, we have one Colorado River commissioner, and that's for a reason. We don't have 5 of them or 6 or so she is the voice. And so when there are op-eds that come out and Becky's like, this is what's going on, I really encourage you all to take a hard look and re-amplify that. Use those comms people you have, resend that, retweet that, and get the word out. I mean, most of you have, various different social media platforms and so forth, but just re-amplify what she's saying. So.
Well, the Bureau Director said 60 days. And I guess just all the discussion we've had here about what it's going to take to create paradigm shifts, et cetera, and what you said about unilateral, more south or lower basin than upper basin, I guess, could you just maybe elaborate on reality of 60 days?
Well, so we, I wouldn't say that we knew that was coming so explicitly, but I would say we've known that there's been a lot of hubbub, and I think we in the upper basin are very focused on staying aligned and where we see what we could do, and that may not be universally loved across the upper basin, but I think we need to put out some thoughts and ideas for sure. I have yet to hear what's going to come from the lower basin in terms of their thoughts and ideas. I think, like I mentioned, another potential drought response operations agreement will be coming. We'll be definitely thinking about that. Other methods of conservation across the upper basin that are temporary in foundation will potentially be something that is discussed. I don't know what else is an option for us in the upper basin. I really don't know how much more we can squeeze from this turnup. When you look at the 1 million acre foot reduction that occurred last year, that where that was on the backs of, right? I mean, we know that came from agriculture. We know that had, Carlisle says it all came from him. If you didn't hear that, but we know that where that came from, we know the impact of that. But that is on the backs of our local communities, our rural communities, the lifeblood of the state. When we talk about some of the impacts of COVID and supply chain issues and things like that, us having less water for less production at the same time of that. We have to be thinking about all of that and saying, okay, how much more can we squeeze out? And I get concerned about the tipping points in our small communities of where how much more we can cut and who benefits and who bears the brunt.
Great, thanks. Oh, Melly, and then we'll go online for questions.
Thank you. I guess it's a two-part question. One is so you really don't know what the lower basin is thinking about doing. Is that what I hear you say?
I think there's been some creative thoughts and ideas that have been coming out. I think I have to highlight a little bit on that 500 plus plan that came out last December, their thoughts and ideas for to save 500,000 acre feet. And that was with a significant amount of funding that backed it up. And they've struggled coming up with that in a voluntary, temporary, compensated way. Vaguely familiar, right? But that 500 plus plan has struggled really getting substantial involvement in that. And so I think there are some ideas along those types of lines where the cuts should occur. I think they're looking in every sector, municipal, agriculture, industrial. And I am confident that they are going to provide something. And I am confident that we are going to be making sure that it is meaningful and verifiable.
Thanks for that. Just the other part of that is that I just get really concerned about the political influence, because if this becomes your politicians versus our politicians, we know California has a lot of power there. Have you seen any indication of politics trying to I'm talking about
daily.
Congress, Congress politics is what I'm talking about, trying to tinker either with a compact or just tilt things around so California doesn't have to come up with money.
Well, and I think that's why we need to focus as the Upper Basin on the science behind all of this and really focus. I think that the numbers are the numbers, the facts are the facts. And so yes, politics, there's no way we can avoid the politics in that. But again, that's why I've said, as a state, as the Upper Basin, where people are doing good, we need to stand together. And I'm not talking about just across the Upper Basin. If we see folks putting in extra effort, whether it's in Mexico or California or Arizona or Nevada, we need to say, hey, we need to stand with good and make sure. But first and foremost, as Colorado, we need to stand together. And then I think that provides a significant amount of influence if not only Colorado stands together, but the Upper Basin stands together, and types of industries stand together, that sort of thing.
Can I just?
Yeah, Andy?
Toss, just real quickly, Commissioner, I completely agree with everything Becky said. I would just, I'm one of those who's a little less diplomatic than Becky on these issues. One, there is some discussion among the ag community in the lower basin to look for water conservation. They know that they are the primary target of the Bureau of Reclamation. My concern is that the conversations I've had with them are all about more temporary loans of water back to Mead. They need permanent, complete reductions in use in the lower basin. It's hard to say that because we do enjoy the benefits of their agricultural production, but the simple mass balance equation is that the Colorado River has too many demands and too little supply, and it is likely to get worse in the future, period. And so what does that mean for us? It means that the giant in the room down the lower basin needs to reduce their use. It also means inside of our state, because we all depend on it, the Colorado River, that we all actually have to figure out how to reduce our use. I mean, we're working with our municipalities, we're working with our agricultural partners. How do we reduce that use? And what what are the ideas to bring that total consumptive number down within our state? Not because we want to send more water to the lower basin, but because we're part of a river system that is way out of whack. And it's the environment that's taking it in the shorts. It's our agriculture that is literally at a tipping point in many regions of our state. So we've got to collaborate within our state to bring that use down. That's not, you know, I've had people suggest to me that and I can tell you, just yesterday, someone said, hey, why don't you push for all the Front Range municipalities to go for 1 day a week watering? I said, well, if I did that, I'd also need to push for the West Slope municipalities to go for 1 day a week watering. And I'm not opposed to that at all. I think those are the kinds of actions we need to take, and we need to think about what we value as a community and as a state. The politics are awful. The fact that the Bureau made this announcement during an election year, during a very heated cycle, just look at it really closely. The Senate's at balance, and Arizona is absolutely the swing state. Nevada is now too. So if it were up to the administration, will they hammer the lower basin before November 3rd? Like, I think they should. I don't think so, right? So there are politics at play here. And I would just say, to the extent that anyone here converses with our federal delegation, now this is me, not Becky, clearly, make sure that you're communicating the pain and the suffering that our water users in our state are encountering, because they're hearing about poor Arizona. So make sure they know that our state is top of their mind, right? That we are losing our agricultural community. We are losing the vitality of our communities because we don't have the water supply. This is not about saving Arizona, okay? I like people in Arizona. I don't have anything against them. They need to take some steps down there to live within the reality that we have, as do we. So, sorry.
Thank you, Andy. Would you like to hand out Senator Bennett or Senator Hickenlooper's phone number while you're at it? And Andy kind of touched on something that I nuanced. And so I'm going to put a little magnifying glass on the nuance, where I talked about the reliance on the times of plenty, or the reliance on the reservoirs. That reliance is what needs to change, and that's the permanent cuts. And we need to figure out how to help permanent cuts happen. And there are things that we need to do on a temporary basis, but more importantly, we need to not be in this situation again. We need to be able to see it coming and react to it in real time and make adjustments accordingly. And so I think that's incredibly important. Thank you, Andy, for saying a lot of those things.
Great. I have a feeling we're going to go over time, but this is very important discussions, and it's great to have Becky here. So let's move to online now. And I see, how about Jairus first, and then I see Ken Curtis as well after Jairus. So online.
Much, Becky, I appreciate your summary and your comments. I go to the last bullet on your slide, and that's measurement and monitoring investments. You know, until we know what's really happening on the West Slope in terms of diversions, I don't know how we can begin to manage the problem. And I think that's a place that we really need to focus, is getting accurate data so that we can defend our position with our fellow states.
Thanks for that, Jairus. And I think that's been one of the pushes, is that we get the money that's set aside through the bipartisan infrastructure law, set aside and get that on the ground and moving quickly. So that's obviously been a focus, and we're pushing for that
Great.
From the Upper Basin state side.
Thank you.
Jairus, just want to say that come on over to West Slope. We'll show you all our measuring devices and let you know that we actually do measure water.
Well, let me say this. Come to the East Slope and you'll see what measurement is.
Okay, let's move to Ken Curtis. I think your hand's up.
Yeah, and Jairus, we probably do need a couple of trips. because I have all our measurements, but I'm sure I'd learn something from you. But it does speak to just in support of us sticking together as an upper basin and a state and following up with our legislators. I would recommend everybody start working on your system specifically and start pulling together your elevator speech and your stump speech. Obviously, just on my mind, some of the bullets we're starting to incorporate with these rains and a slightly better winter and monsoons last year. It's amazing that we've gone from 8% to 30% down here. And yet that's enough to give a little bit of hope to that recovery that was mentioned by several people. Having said that, I have to look at a lower basin and say, which part of our 30% do you really want us to give up when we're still in recovery mode? On top of that, we send 20% of that 30% down the river already. Beyond that, senior rights return flow another 20%. So look in your own backyard and start seeing how you fit into this puzzle piece, because we will be talking amongst our Colorado water leaders. We meet with other upper basin states. We're tied closely with New Mexico down here in the Southwest. And then, as Andy said, you occasionally meet the lower basin, and we've got a lot of education to do there. So work on your local issues and then also project Becky's position. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Ken, for that. Anyone else online have any questions or comments? Okay, see none. And anyone in here? See none. I just want to thank Becky for your leadership. Just so you all know, as you could imagine, I mean, as Stan mentioned, this is in the news constantly. It doesn't matter what media outlet it is. And Becky is literally zigzagging the southwest part of the United States, you know, meeting with other Colorado River principal leaders. And it just takes an enormous amount of time. It's a full-time job in itself, I would say, with all the time you're putting in. So thank you, Becky. Colorado's very, very lucky to have your leadership in this role. And again, you know, as she speaks as Colorado River Commissioner, I urge you all just to amplify what she says, because having one strong voice for Colorado River issues is very, very important now, more so than ever, frankly. So thank you. So let's give her a round of applause. Yeah, definitely. Okay, next up, we have the Work Plan Subcommittee Pepo report. I know you only have a couple of minutes. Okay, Aaron and Lisa, turned over to you, both.
So I'm glad I wasn't ready, because I think that was a much more timely conversation. So thank you, Becky. Now I have -7 minutes. So a number of you, I don't have the list open, but a number of you already participated and are participating in the subcommittee that we convened after our last meeting to really talk about and try to refine a new and more clear set of objectives to guide our efforts. And I think also to restructure our meetings and to focus more on hearing from the basins while also getting updates like we did just now on critical state issues. And, you know, one of the kind of central to that discussion is the recognition that we all need to be to really be engaged and to be working board members for this effort to be successful. And I think we've heard a lot of good examples from the Basin Roundtable panel we had earlier about all the work that is happening, and seeing how we can all support each other from, you know, basin to basin, state to basin. The primary piece of our new potential mission, I think, came up is something that also organically came up in the discussions today, which is how the IBCC can act as a clearinghouse to really support and promote all the local efforts around funding, drought response, innovative water management. We've talked about providing kind of, you know, working with Nate potentially on developing some additional guidance, kind of how can we take the tool and make sure that that is applicable and answers all the questions that the local basins might have and the projects might have. I know I've chatted with a couple people today, like, well, we're in this world and we're still not clear if federal funding can be available for X or Y projects. So how can we be that connective tissue? And I'm going to leave it there. I think that was the primary focus, is how can we at this next 3 to 5 years act to, bring the information from the federal government, from the state down to the basins to make sure that all the good projects that we're all talking about are highlighted, whether it's in the focus of the governor's office when he's thinking about how to spend that match funding, if it's making sure that these are highlighted for water spark grants, but also learning from each other to say what kinds of projects should we be considering here, and how can we share lessons learned from other basins, or also say, hey, we need a little bit of help here. So we have no time. So I'm going to leave it at that. I think maybe in October we can have a longer discussion about this and some of the other secondary issues that came up. But I know, Lisa, you also wanted to chat a little bit about the Pepo side, right?
Keep your water away.
Yeah, I apologize because I know that we're really short on time. And of course, we've talked a lot about, I think Jairus brought up the idea that Pepo, there's a really good intersection with the Pepo efforts that are happening. Next year, we're going to be launching a statewide messaging initiative, and the IBCC could certainly play a role in that. We also talked about convening the Basin Roundtables and the IBCC to have more of a dialogue, sort of a C9 summit, and talk more about that. I think one of the things that I just wanted to leave you with, just to think about maybe for our October meeting, is when we were talking about the work plan, we talk about these real big visions and these real big ideas. And, most of us live in a world where if it's a work plan, there's actually a scope of work. There are things to do on a timeline, and perhaps an endpoint where there's a product or an idea or an initiative that comes out of that. So the question that I would pose is the discussion, for the sake of discussion. I think, Sean, you brought up earlier that, our discussions are kind of the negotiating side of what we were intended to be doing in any case. But to what level do we want to see some specificity in our work plan and in what we can create and support? So I just would throw that out. And I think we'll continue that conversation on October.
Great. That's efficient. Thank you so much.
Not to delay.
Yeah, questions? Yeah, I'm
Well,
sorry, Al.
Just somewhat of a comment as far as maybe not delaying till October, but not prolonging this meeting either. But as far as, I think like Bob and Emma were talking about, is kind of assigning some of the things to the roundtables. And I guess I think there's some good opportunity in the Southwest to kind of combine, I'll say, some research on forest health, as well as the use of ATMs to meet the water needs. Like in the Upper San Juan, we identified a lot of needs. I mean, there was $8.6 million worth of agricultural improvements. So that's, I guess I would like for us to maybe not wait till October and put some more meat to some ideas like that, or further in what the Rio Grande has done. And so we can be able to utilize all the money that's being available or becoming available. And so.
Yeah. Aaron, follow up?
I agree, and I know how hard it is to schedule a full IBCC meeting, but maybe we could have some sort of a subcommittee conversation between now and October, focused on exactly what you just talked about.
Yeah, no,
I think
would
that'd
be
be
great.
great.
I just was, I wouldn't say disappointed, but who wants another meeting?
I think we can do a virtual
Yeah, no,
subcommittee meeting.
exactly,
I'd love
but
to
I
have
mean
an
a
opportunity.
subcommittee
Yeah.
so that we can bring it back to the IBCC in October.
I'm okay with that. Hands on who wants to participate in that subcommittee? So the subcommittee chairs, is everyone capturing this? So I think it's more or less the subcommittee members from before too, it looks like, so.
Paul got his
Yeah.
virtual hand up.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that
Yeah,
was part of the thing too, is kind of using what Paul's doing up there is somewhat of the template for whatever other roundtables decide their priorities to be.
Okay, that sounds good. Stan?
Yeah, I won't belabor anything. I kind of, it's wonderful how enjoyed the CBS note that I had, and I would just say it was followed up by a article or a story about how good Las Vegas has done, and the Southern Nevada Water Authority on saving water and the fact that we did not have some other input on some of the stuff. But as we're redoing Pepo, as I understand what's happening with additional money and everything else, and as was mentioned earlier, you have on the ground some people that can deliver part of the message. And I think, irritates me when I see, the message is changed. The people they talk to are not the people that are the water providers or the agency for the state. It's somebody else. And this is who's being quoted on some of the stuff. And like I say, it bothers me. And to the extent we can coordinate our message, to some extent, I think is very good. The local newspaper had a story from Western writers. Number one is, the Upper Basin's not doing anything, and you had to have George Sibley, on behalf of the West Slope, come back and say, yeah, we're doing a hell of a lot. But that was initiated. What we need to do is take the affirmative and move forward with our message when we can and utilize all these sources. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dan. Okay, let's move now to Russ on Colorado Water Plan.
So if Aaron had -7 minutes, I have, like less than that. But we've got a whole lunch. So the bottom line is, and you don't have to go. You're so sweet, Viola. You don't have to go through the slides, though. That's great. I appreciate it. Bottom line is it's out now. So it's out online. Many thanks to my team, some of who are here. Our new hire, actually, Jeff Rodriguez, taking the place of Sam Stein, and then Kat Weissmiller's been diligently working on getting this thing up, as well as the whole CWCB and many, many others. I know Commissioner Greenberg's here, and her team at CDA have been just fabulous to work with, and so many other partners across the state. So when you go in, I think there are a few things. There's a lot of resources. In fact, the presentation I was going to give you today, we pre-recorded that. We pre-recorded it a couple of times, and that's up online. So there's kind of a short version and a longer version that will walk you through the high points. But I think the biggest piece is, we really tried to be more clear than ever about all the areas of our state are interconnected. We really have to uplift agriculture, municipal, environment, and rec, and just resilience, and thinking about what goes into resilience, and recognizing we have a role as government in supporting that. But it really involves inclusivity and making sure we're bringing everybody to the table, thinking about climate adaptation and how we're going to address those challenges, and tackling some of those hard issues that Andy was bringing up too, even thinking about transformative landscape change. So I think you're going to see a lot of things to like in there. I think there's about 50 actions, probably north of that really, but about 50 actions for partners that are the kind of things we hope people will come in for grant making and make happen, and very clear ties to the Water Plan Grant Program. And then 50 agency actions that are kind of work that CWCB or our collaborating agencies will help support. So happy to talk with any of you more about all of this. I'm sure there's a lot to take in, and just, you've got my number. Give me a ring.
Awesome. Thank you, Russ. Any questions for us? Thank you so much to your team. Just amazing the work that you've done to get to this point today. So, okay. Yeah, Melly?
So when are you planning to start over again with the?
That is a great question. I was thinking about this morning. We started this, I think, even just some of the initial contracting pretty much right after 2015. So we've now, I think for a variety of reasons, really set the expectation that we'll have a 10-year update cycle, so that we do have a little bit of a reprieve before we go back into the technical update, back into the BIPs, and some of that based on input that we heard from everybody of just planning fatigue. So we've got a little bit more buffer this time. But it's, of course, now it's all about implementation, right?
Great. Awesome. Well, I just want to make a couple quick closing remarks, and then we have a celebration. Or
right above us is a room. Take your food up the round if you want to do that. You can stay in here.
okay. Okay. One request I have for everyone too is I want to make sure we capture this moment of the release of the water plan and IBCC being here in my home community to get a photo. And so make sure, like, I don't know, Viola, if you want to facilitate that, or I will, I don't know, just make sure, don't leave until we get a group photo. Is that cool with everyone?
Then
maybe we should do it right after this then. And okay, let's meet outside.
Sorry.
Yeah.
sorry to jump in, but I would be completely remiss not to thank our CWCB board for all their work and involvement in this, including you, Dan, but also I'm seeing Director Dutton, and just want to say thank you to our board.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. You did amazing work. So before we go outside and get a photo, I just want to thank everyone for being here. This really means a lot to me. And as you probably recall from the February meeting, I said, hey, you know, I think I was pretty blunt with you all, frankly. It was kind of like, hey, don't show up unless you want to work, right? And you're all representing your basins, and so you have great respect in your part of Colorado, and I really do feel like there's no substitute than meeting in person right now. And you know, I'm a relatively new chairman of this, and I really do look forward to getting to know you all better. Nathan, I'm just staring at you because it was so fun to be in your backyard and Heather's backyard and Emma's backyard, and we really want to do more of that. And I want to show up for your roundtable meetings and be there in person. I know it's, you know, hybrid for most of you, for many of you still, but so we'll make sure that those get scheduled for that. You know, I think we had a really great meeting. Hopefully you all enjoy, you know, hearing the Basin Roundtable kind of updates, you know, of what you're all working on. For me, it's really invaluable. And so I want to make sure for future meetings that we give enough time that we can really dive in to really hear stories of what's working well, what's not, you know, how we can all learn from each other. I really appreciate the feedback and information from Nate and Lauren on the federal and state information. I mean, that is just popping up everywhere. And I think we really need to make sure that you both, and especially you, Nate, have kind of a standing invitation for our future meetings. But the big takeaway for that too is, you know, like, how can we continue to work with you all on your needs too, making sure we can help you get projects off the ground. And I really want to explore how we can take things to another whole level and kind of add on to the great staffing that Becky and CWCB will be able to offer for those 4, you know, regional people around the state. Becky, your updates, I mean, Colorado River issues are front and center for everyone in the water world. It's definitely a main focus of discussion. So really wonderful to have you here. And I'm sure we could talk about river issues all morning, really. So thank you for your leadership. Hearing from, you know, kind of innovative ideas too. It was really great to have Bob, Jason, and Emma here to really hear, you know, what's going on, what's working well, what, you know, areas you're thinking about. So I really like that as well. So do you all like that? I mean, not just, it was great hearing from them, but I think in the future, it'd be great to kind of have some focus of people, if you're working on some innovative ideas that we should really think about. Russ, it's always great to hear from you and your team. Thank you for helping us set this up. I know you and Kat and Viola, and you know, it's definitely a big group effort to find spaces, to figure out all the logistics. It's a lot of moving parts. So thank you so much. And really, just in closing, I want to, you know, when you look at this landscape, I really think the time is now. You know, you look at climate change, you look at our forest health challenges, with the water plan update, the state and federal funding that's like, seem to be just kind of landing on our lap, right? That we need to come together now more than ever. And you all as leaders, I really urge you all to hopefully raise your hand right now after I read this, but I challenge you all as IBCC members to really work to develop one project in your basin to move forward a grant by the June meeting of 2023. So I'm not saying you have to be done with getting the grant by tomorrow, by the 1st, but I'm talking by 2023 June. I really urge you all to step up to the plate, to work, you know, to get a grant project off the ground, to get it submitted. So I want to challenge you all. Who's going to raise your hand to try to make that happen? Yeah? Who's going to make that happen? And Bo, I'm looking at you.
I don't got a lot of influence.
No, I hear you. But I challenge each and every one of you. And Bo, you could be, you know, a silent partner with someone, okay? But I appreciate that. Yeah. But I also, just in closing too, I really thank Lisa and Aaron and being, the subcommittee leaders too. And Al, that's a great idea too, that we want to look at these topics that we can continue to rally around. And I look forward to participating in that meeting too. But thank you for those subcommittee folks that are willing to step up as well. So with that, I guess, just thank you again for being here. Really, there's a lot of water challenges, and hopefully someone took a photo of all the folks that raised their hand, which I think was just about 99%, almost everyone. So let's go outside. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah. So again, thank you so much, and let's just go outside. Let's grab a photo, and we're gonna have a great celebration and celebrate the water plan rollout. And let's get a photo first, though. Everyone outside. Thanks again.